1 p.m. And let's see, do we need to call a roll here?
I believe everyone is present. I can. The only one I don't have is President Rosick, but I can do it if you'd like to.
No, I think we're good. And then I'll cede the chair to Bart, please.
And I will actually cede it to our consultant, Jackie Mitchell from Vanderwall. So we met last week to discuss more additional village chapters. She is here to present the 3 chapters that we hired the consultant for. So without further ado, I will just pass it over to Jackie. If you need to share the screen, Jackie, let me know. I think I can set you up.
Yes, I will take you up on that, Bart. Thank you.
Okay.
While Bart is working on that and while I get my screen shared, I did notice on the agenda that we have item 2 is issues and opportunities chapter, item 3 is intergovernmental cooperation, and 4 is land use. And I just wanted to ask the Plan Commission if it was all right if I moved land use up on that list so we could talk about that before we talk about intergovernmental cooperation.
Are we going to start with the introduction, though?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Is there a specific reason why we wouldn't do them in the order that was on the agenda?
Yeah, I want to make sure we have enough time to cover all of the land use topics, and I feel like that's a pretty critical item.
Okay, are we trying to get this done before the debate starts, or what's the ETA? Are we working with a 90-minute, or what? Just tell me what the framework is here.
I like that idea.
I'll talk fast.
90 minutes, right? If possible. Okay.
That's fine with me.
But then I defer to the consultants who know the business.
Barbara gets 3 questions. 3 questions.
Per page.
So can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Great. So I'll dive right in. So hello, it's great to see all of you virtually. What I'd like to do this evening is provide you with a very quick project status update. And then I will be doing my presentation, which I'm counting on the fact that all of you have read the draft materials. And so my hope is that we can really focus on those policy questions that were included in your meeting packet. That being said, if you need to pause me at any point to ask a question or discuss something, that sounds great to me, but I will be pausing throughout the presentation to address different policy questions. So I'll try to keep my talking to a minimum so that you all have time to discuss these issues. All right. Gotta get my system organized here. Okay. All right, so project status update. On the right of my screen, you'll see a very small project schedule, and I've grayed out the tasks that we've completed. So you can see that we're moving along. We're more than halfway through our tasks. The Vanderwall-led chapters have been drafted. The village-led chapters are well on their way and are still in progress. And so the next step in this planning process is to review these chapters with the Plan Commission, and then finally assemble a full, complete plan document with all chapters and all of the maps. The maps are something that we're going to be beginning next month, and so those will help drive the development of the next draft. From there, we'll be moving into the public review phase and getting the public's take on how they think the draft plan looks. So just a reminder that this is an update of your existing plan, so we are using the 2030 plan as a starting point. The updated content of this plan is based on the latest data available, demographic data, housing data, economic development data. We're building heavily on the many recent plans, surveys, and studies that the village has done in recent years, particularly within the last 5 years. And we are also taking a lot of direction from the public input that is part of this plan update. So the virtual public open house, the stakeholder meetings, and then the comment form. We got a lot of great input from all of those tools, and those have been put into this draft plan. And then finally, of course, Plan Commission input will be a very valuable part of the plan. So I just wanted to emphasize that what we're reviewing today is still a draft. We're absolutely looking for input and direction on how to get it to the final product. So just as a reminder, Vanderwall and Associates' role in this project is really a collaborative update with village staff, specifically with Bart. So we're leading 3 chapters that we're discussing tonight. We're leading the public participation component of the plan update. We'll be advising on maps, We'll also be sort of the owner of the document so that the end product is a really attractive, user-friendly document that has consistent formatting throughout. And then we'll be doing project management in close coordination with Bart. So with that, I'd like to take us to our issues and opportunities chapter. So that's the first chapter of the plan. And I'm sure as you saw, there's a lot of background data and information in that plan and in that chapter. But what I'd really like to focus our attention on is the strategic directions graphic. So you probably found this in chapter 1. It was an 11 by 17 format graphic. The purpose of this graphic is to really highlight key issues and assets in Shorewood. And also the graphic identifies 4 strategic directions that really build on those assets and issues that Shorewood faces. And the idea is that the strategic directions would actually help to address those key issues. Each of those strategic directions is followed by action steps. So how could we get it done? How could we make it happen? And so it's really designed to guide plan implementation. It's a really visual, attractive looking graphic. You can actually use it as a handout. So if somebody has 5 minutes and they want to know what the comp plan is all about, you could actually hand them this standalone graphic, and that really outlines what the village's priorities are in the short term. So this is something new. It's not something you have in your current plan. I'll show you. Here's our visual of it as it currently stands. As I mentioned before, this will become something more visually pleasing with photos and graphics and images and things like that. These strategic directions were developed based on staff input, public input. Stakeholder interviews were particularly informative for this graphic. And again, designed to address some of the issues that Shorewood may face in the coming years.
So is this the time to talk about issues with the strategic directions, or will that become later?
I've got like 1 or 2 more slides, and then I would love to.
Okay.
I would love to talk about them. Yes. So just wanted to show you a few examples of, here's one that a similar version or a similar graphic that we've recently done for Glendale, and another example that we've done a few years back. So this is kind of the direction that this is headed. So, trying to keep the text to the minimum so that we can have something really graphically appealing. So our 4 strategic directions, I'm sure you've read them all, but it's ensuring redevelopment on Capitol and Oakland meets community goals, promote inclusivity, racial equity, and diversity in Shorewood, actively pursue attainable and affordable housing for all residents, and remain flexible in the face of retail and office uncertainty. So I think I kind of covered this, but the action steps or the bullet points, we will continue to update those. One thing I forgot to mention is that these 4 strategic directions really do cover the entire comprehensive plan and not just the 3 chapters that we're talking tonight. And so as we sort of finalize those chapters and get those into better shape, we may need to update some of these bullet points to reflect those changes. So here's our moment to talk. I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on the 4 strategic directions. If there's anything you really think is off base, or if you think we missed something, please let us know, and I'd love to hear from you.
So my question was on strategic direction 1, bullet point number 1. Boy, this was small text. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to, in general, discourage or prohibit replacement or redevelopment of existing residential adjacent to Capitol and Oakland, but that seemed to contradict other areas where we were going to encourage this flexibility. I guess the thing is just that you want to make sure that the first floor is commercial or office, and then the upper levels would be residential.
I think you pointed out I could have written this better. This is talking about like residential development next door or behind Capitol and Oakland. So not necessarily within the same mixed use building, but if you've got a single family home or a duplex, next to or behind Oakland and Capitol, the idea is that this is saying keep those land uses the same.
Okay, but I guess my point is there are many people that would have no problem living at Oakland on Oakland or Capitol. They're just not my demographic, generally speaking. And we would just want to make sure then, like, let's say Queensway and the North Shore Bank location that's vacant. I see no reason why we couldn't have 2 to 3 floors of residential on Oakland there if the first floor was commercial office. Is that?
Well, I think this is what we're talking about, like the next row of houses behind those sites that you're talking about.
So what you're saying is we don't want to encroach on the residential areas of those blocks?
Correct.
We don't want commercial creep into the residential areas.
That's correct. And that's actually a question that I identified in our policy question document about confirming that is the direction that the plan commission wishes to go. So I'm happy to talk about that concept more.
My other concern was affordable housing seems to only apply to the cost of buying houses or apartments, rentals, but we do not address taxes here, do we?
Would anyone have any suggestions about how you might want to address taxes for this?
How do you do that in your industry? How do you put that into a strategic direction 3? I would defer to the experts.
Well, typically, I think the most common way to do that is to work with developers who use affordable housing tax credits, and that allows them to bring in affordable units. I haven't.
What I've heard referred to as Section 8.
Mm-mm.
Oh, Section 8's a federal housing subsidy.
Oh, okay.
I haven't worked with any communities that have, for example, had a different tax rate for affordable housing. In fact, I don't even think that is possible. So I think typically tax credits are the way that most communities do it, but it doesn't really have much to do with the village's tax rate. It's more to do with incentives that developers can get that reduces their tax burden to develop the affordable housing project.
Could I maybe step in for a quick second, Trustee Stokebrand?
Sure.
So we discussed the village's general tax rate along with the school district and the county and that whole formula back in the economic development chapter. And I have not had a chance to represent an update of that. But if I'm understanding, I think perhaps where the question is going, I think an additional bullet point in here focusing on a desire to keep the tax rate low so that people are not overburdened with taxes and therefore their housing costs, which include taxes, would also be maintained at a lower rate. So if I'm hearing correctly that question, I think that ties into our economic development chapter. And that is something that definitely will be coming back out in the next draft of that. I just haven't had a chance to represent that. So if that's what I'm hearing, I think that would be an appropriate bullet point to add when Jackie and I have a chance to kind of merge more of these thoughts together.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bart. That helps a lot.
I made the same notes as Trustee Stokebrand did, that when we're talking about keeping Shorewood affordable, it's not just new housing, it's affordable for the people who have lived here 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. And the real estate market is going to do what the real estate market does. It's going to go up, and in 2008 it went down. But taxes only seem to go in one direction. So whether if you can afford to buy a house, that's great. But it's whether you can afford to stay in it, especially with an older house, that always needs work. That is a problem for every person in Shorewood that owns property. And so I think we're talking apples and oranges. Yes, if we have new developments, we don't want them to be always luxury housing, but keeping Shorewood affordable, when we talk about that, that's really has to do with taxes. And that gets passed on to renters, with the rents going up, which I think we saw in one of the sections, the increase in rents.
Great. We will make that change.
I have a question on, or maybe I wrote no. In strategic decision 1, that last bullet point, when we talk about only using TIF or considering height bulk increases beyond what is allowed under current zoning when public benefits are allowed. One of the biggest, you may have heard this in some of your stakeholder meetings, But one of the biggest outcries was 6 years ago when the zoning building height was exceeded by 2 floors to put up the Mosaic apartment building. And I don't know what public benefit could have been offered to make that more attractive to
It's
residents.
called Wood Square, and it's like 10 feet by 10 feet, right?
Right. So I don't think, I think if we're going to have a zoning height, we need to respect that, because that came up, I saw that in the land use, the future land uses like on South Oakland, where you're talking about dense housing. And in that same year, this was 6 years ago, so that's 2014, one of the things that people said over and over is they did not want Oakland Avenue to become a canyon. At the time in the Central District Master Plan, there were, high-rise buildings proposed where that parking lot where River Park is, and we didn't want to be driving down Oakland with tall buildings on each side of us. So I think that's something we need to keep in mind. And in one of the sections, the majority of people, when they thought about future buildings in Shorewood, they liked the one at 3510 North Oakland, which is that little 2-story building on the northeast corner of Edgewood and Oakland, where the Sherwin-Williams paint store is next to Humboldt Park. So, that's the building that people like. It's 2 stories, and yet we're thinking, yeah, that whole section, make it denser, make it higher. So I think we need to respect what residents have told us, both in this process and in earlier processes of public input.
Did anyone else have comments on the strategic directions? Anything missing that you would like to see in here?
So is this our point? This is where these would change, otherwise the bullet points will proceed forward in the process as is that correct?
Yes, except for with the exception, as Bart and I mentioned, that as we update the economic development chapter, for example, we might want to bring in recommendations in that chapter that perhaps aren't in here, or if we talk more tonight and we talk about different action steps that we don't want to take, we'll update this graphic to reflect those conversations.
So in the industry, public benefits to me seems extremely vague and subjective.
Mm-hmm.
Are we all comfortable with that? Public benefit, to Barb's point, public benefits.
I would imagine that the village would want to, this is kind of saying to develop that list of what those public benefits would be. And so it is vague, you're right.
But maybe I don't know, in this context, is this okay? If it's, we were just saying in interest here, we thought the public interest was not served. I'm not sure about public benefit, but I had a question on direction 4, strategic direction 4. I cannot support bullet point number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Evaluate and relaunch loan and grant programs. The grant programs here have been highly controversial. And so I wonder if we want to just make that loan programs. This is for the business, retail, office. Are we putting ourselves at an extreme disadvantage for not offering grants?
I couldn't say to be certain, but if you feel that the grant programs haven't been successful to you, I would advise you to remove it from this graphic.
Trustee Stokebrand, are you thinking of the facade grants, or just when we've made grants to businesses like we had given, was it 2.5 million to the developer of the Metro Market?
I guess I put them all in the same category. We did the emergency grants. What was that, 200,000 or 300,000 for COVID? We've done the facade grants, and then the one with the Metro Market.
Yep.
I don't know. I look for what the other people here in the group think.
Those are definitely controversial.
I'll weigh in just briefly. I obviously was not here when the former grant program was in place, but it was modified more recently, right? So for the past 3 years, it was a lesser grant program. I think that was, desired by many to still keep it available, but not have it as lucrative per se to other people. But it's also possible that, if there were to be a grant program, it'd be more focused or simple. But there doesn't have to be. Most definitely, if there does not have to be one. But I just wanted to weigh in that I believe the CDA, had heard community input and did revise it accordingly. And so just keeping the opportunity there, there currently are none, to your point. But if we were to relaunch them, they definitely would need to be focused on what exactly the village or CDA is looking to support, and that's what this plan would hopefully, document. Whether that would be, say a historic renovation, if there's a historic building where perhaps the parapet's falling off and the business owner can't do it, and because they can't do it, we get a lesser product out of that. I'm just trying to think of examples of where potentially a grant program might be in line with things I've heard, character and historic preservation and things like that. Maybe it's not, for signs as the previous program allowed, but I think from my perspective, I think there probably could be a place in it based on what I've heard in the conversation. I would just reiterate that it would need to be, specifically focused on what it is that you're looking to accomplish.
Okay, I'm sold. And it comes second after loans, so I'm sold. I'll go along with it.
Is there a way, well, to continue Kathy's line of question, evaluate and potentially relaunch? I mean, I just don't, to evaluate and relaunch loan program or evaluate and launch,
I see what you're saying. Yep.
Yep.
I don't want people to take away from this that, we're hoping that they start this grant program up, with very little evaluation, which is sort of been the historical trend of this grant program or the old grant programs. So if we're going to do it, I want to make sure that we're putting in appropriate amounts of study and trying to determine what we need versus, sort of the slush fund that used to exist. So I would look to tighten up that bullet point quite a bit more than just evaluate and relaunch either the loan and or the grant program. Potentially relaunch or just evaluate and take relaunch out.
Yeah, evaluate and explore relaunching of loan and or grant programs. How does that sound?
I agree.
I'm more comfortable with that than, it's quite a bit more passive than.
Correct.
Great.
And Bart, hasn't the CDA had discussions about kind of turning its attention away from the business district and more onto residential, where maybe having a loan program used for residential projects, whether it's helping seniors adapt their homes so they can age in place, as opposed to business loans, some of which, kind of went bad for the village?
I mean, they've always had separate programs for neighborhood improvements versus commercial. So it's a two-part question in that respect. The neighborhood improvement loan grant program is currently also frozen. So that they are probably going to, reevaluate sooner than the business program, because that has been more discussed in terms of senior or energy efficiency, things like that. So there are two separate programs, just for clarity.
Shouldn't we put that a bullet point about that then in the affordable housing? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So would that be continue those loans or explore relaunching those loans? What would be the right language for that?
I think something similar to what you had proposed for the last.
Evaluate and reconsider.
Yeah, potentially relaunch or whatever, but.
Okay. Just wanted to get the right.
Evaluate and possibly relaunch or something, put possible.
Or why don't you put explore need for, like evaluate and explore need for loans and grant programs.
Great.
I like that. I mean, that gives you an opportunity to say, no, we don't want it. If that's
It's not a need.
right.
Right.
That's where it is in the future. I don't want people to feel like they have to do this.
And under strategic direction 2, I was curious about Review village ordinances for regulatory barriers to affordable housing or alternative housing options. So that'd be the accessory dwelling unit, for example. Is that, just so I know what we're talking about?
That's what I had in mind, yeah.
Okay. And work closely with the school district on racial equity. Okay, yeah. We're using the same consultant. Actually, he's their employee, so.
Great.
And so then the last one is a small business program to utilize vacant spaces by offering reduced rents. How would we do that if we're not the property owner? Would you offer something to the landlord, or the final bullet?
Yeah, I think you would work with the landlord on, you know, if they haven't been filling that space, by coming to an agreement and how you could get reduced rents for startup.
And can you legally do that? It almost sounds to me like reverse discrimination. If someone comes in and wants to rent something and they're a person of color, they get a reduced, is that?
Well, I know this, LISC Milwaukee has a similar program that they're doing in Milwaukee right now. So I'm not exactly sure how they wrote the program to make it possible, but they do have it is kind of a mission of their program. I don't know if I know they award grants to all types of people. So I think it's more of an objective that they have rather than a requirement that they be people of color or women-led businesses.
Or minority, diversity.
Right,
So
so
then
it's kind of a stated objective of the program.
And the onus is on the landlord to offer reduced rent, but the village gets involved by subsidizing it, or how does that?
That's, I think, one way that you could do it.
So it'd be another grant, it'd be a giveaway, right? I just wonder if this would work in Shorewood. I don't know.
Yeah, this might be another example where you might want to say explore rather than start the program. You
Sure.
know, evaluate and explore.
Yeah.
I agree. And while you're all reviewing this, I'll just point out too that a lot of the items under strategic direction number 1 will address when we talk about the land use chapter too. So if you've got thoughts on those, we'll definitely have more time to talk about those later.
On that direction number 3, we're talking about recruiting developers for senior housing that meets continuum of care and needs of aging Shorewood residents. Are you talking about a place like, say, St. John's on the Lake, where you can start an independent living, move to assisted, and then dementia care, memory care?
Yeah, I think
those take up a lot of room or height. And I've been looking at senior living for my dad lately, and I just don't think we have that kind of space in Shorewood.
I think when we say continuum of care, it could be a place like St. John's, but it could also just be a recognition that there are different levels of care that are needed. And so ensuring that all or most types of care are available here in Shorewood, where, you know, whether it's on one site or distributed throughout the community.
Okay. And strategic direction number 4, I did have a question about what you meant by form-based zoning ordinance, which I then read, you know, more about in the land use chapter. But I still worry about kind of a loose zoning and land use. And I'll give you an example. We have some of those mixed use buildings on North Oakland. And a couple years ago, the village trustees received a letter it was made public, so it was part of the packet, from a resident in the Ravenna building, I think, complaining about the noise from people sitting in one of the parklets outside. I think it was Three Lions pub and restaurant, because the noise was going up to the apartments. And it was really ironic because the person who wrote the letter, her husband was formerly in the CDA who brought that project to the village. So when you're talking about mixing residences in a business district, you could have a conflict. And so, I mean, I looked at some of the couple links that you provided real briefly, you know, just to see the pictures, and they look great, but I'm still concerned about not having specific zoning uses in our plan
Mhm.
or in our use maps, you know, being that flexible. And so just wanted to mention that.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that. A lot of our clients that do pursue form-based standards in their codes don't do purely performance zoning. They tend to do a hybrid approach. So they'll include form-based provisions that relate to the bulk of the building or the height or the step back. But then they do realize they want to regulate land use, at least on some level. And so they will include land use-based regulations. And that's what I would recommend for Shorewood.
I would agree.
And so is that somewhere, this, what you just said, is that somewhere in a document, what you recommend for us, this hybrid?
You know, I think that could be better spelled out in the land use chapter. I don't think I say in the chapter that I wish to throw out all use-based regulation, but I think it would be good to clarify that in the chapter that we intend to keep that.
And then explain the whole discussion, the pros, the cons of going one way or the other, and then your validation of the hybrid model.
Great idea.
In the, Jackie, in the text for that chapter, under strategic direction 1, there's a line that talks about a desire for Shorewood to accommodate more housing units in the future. And I'm just wondering why we reached that conclusion, since it looked like the population is going to remain steady. And so, I mean, in 1.5 square miles, we cannot be all things to all people. And as the already densest community in Wisconsin, I'm just wondering, you know, a lot of people want to live here. It's desirable, so that's great. But, you know, there's only so much room. And so I'm just wondering, at what point do we stop building more housing units before we turn into something that resembles the third ward, you know, with a lot of taller buildings? And in other sections, we talk about wanting to keep that community character, and then people wanted 2 to 4 story buildings. So I'm just not sure how we drew the conclusion that we need to keep accommodating more in the future.
Well, I think first of all, the decision as to where the line is, you know, where Shorewood wants to stop adding housing units is purely a policy decision, and something that this body can definitely provide input on and steer that question. You know, something we definitely heard throughout the public input and even in adopted planning documents was the need to attract a more diverse population, both racially and socioeconomically, provide housing options for people with disabilities and for seniors, you know, related to that continuum of care conversation we just had. And as you know, because Shorewood is built out, really the only way to achieve those objectives would be to add more housing units. So I'm not sure if there are necessarily individuals out there who are saying we need to hit this target of number of housing units in Shorewood, but it's a recognition that there are a lot of needs that aren't being met in Shorewood that people who live there now would like to see met.
Can we meet some of those needs by encouraging renovation and updating of existing multifamily structures without having to, say, tear something down, start over?
I think that could get you part of the way there. You know, based on the village's affordable housing report that you did last year, that report identified a pretty significant gap in the number of housing units that are needed in Shorewood to meet affordable housing needs for the community. And that's just the residents that you have now. And that doesn't even begin to speak to attracting a more diverse population. So, you know, my thought is that renovations could probably, I can't imagine that happening on a really mass scale to the level needed to meet the affordable housing needs in Shorewood today.
Yeah, and as we said earlier, when we're talking about affordable, we're looking at the whole picture, not just what it costs to buy or rent a property, but taxes. That's, you know,
Yeah,
that's the main thing.
I mean, I guess the question is, if we can't go out, so we have to go up with housing, right? I mean, there's no,
yeah, generally.
we're totally built out, you know, so if we're talking about wanting to increase housing, you know, and I'm clearly not an expert in this area, but what percentage of that increased housing would be sort of owner occupied housing? Or are we just adding a bunch of apartments and condos for renters in a community that already has what I think is an exceptionally high percentage of renters versus homeowners. So how do you balance it? How do you become more things to more people while not adding towers of housing?
Mhm.
Well,
Well,
could I say something? I think that I don't necessarily think that increasing racial diversity means that you need to increase housing to accommodate new people. I think the idea, well, in my mind, the idea is to make, would be to make Shorewood more welcoming in general, so that when people of color or other minorities are looking to purchase a home, they will consider Shorewood as an option. I mean, I think that's really the barrier. The barrier isn't necessarily that there isn't housing, it's that oftentimes people just don't consider Shorewood as an option for a variety of reasons. So I don't know that it necessarily means increased housing, not in my mind at least.
So you will be 100% correct. How do you do that? And then what role do we play in doing that?
Oh, I mean, I think, okay, so as a person of color, when I'm going out to choose a neighborhood, and I think particularly for African-American minorities, you see if there are other people, if other people of your community live there. So that's one way. The other way is just, I think, I was thinking about it, it comes up in that whole parking discussion, that bullet point, because I was thinking about it in terms of parking. There are cultural aspects to policy and regulations that people don't, or implications that people don't always recognize. Like parking, like the limitation of 20 days. I remember thinking when we first moved here that it was, I just thought it was crazy because I had moved, I had grown up in an immigrant neighborhood where most of the people had family that would come and visit them for summers, would, either be coming from other countries or just in general, like it was always a rigmarole when my kids were little and my family would come for, long periods of time, several times a year, just to say, oh, well, bring your other car this time, or we'll move our cars. And anyway, so there are implications for cultural uses in the way that laws are made. And I think those are the things that could be looked at a little more closely in Shorewood. Meaning it just like noise regulations, not that everyone wants noisy, but the idea is that the types of regulations that Shorewood puts in place often sort of satisfy a particular culture, a particular way of living that doesn't necessarily include other people's way of living. Does that make sense?
Yeah, nicely put.
It does. I mean, also, as a person of color, I don't know how. I would be interested to see how we would make that work, or how you would take a look at that with so many different cultures, right? I mean, it's sort of like my large. It's hard to describe, right? Like sort of my large Cuban family, when they come up from Florida, they don't traditionally stay with me, and so it's just different. I don't know that it's always a cultural difference as much as it's just a familial difference. It's,
Right. I'm just saying that I think that some of those things are things that people look at. I'm not sure I can speak for other cultures, but those are the things that people look at when they're moving to a neighborhood. I just because I've been thinking of parking, but there are other things that people look at, like, well, this is what I like to do. Does this exist nearby? And I think those are things that, I don't know that anyone can speak to anybody else's culture, but I think those are the kinds of things that become the prohibitive barriers for people choosing neighborhoods.
Okay. I mean, I guess I'm more curious to see and I shouldn't say more curious, I'm curious to see how other communities have done it. You know, how if they've tackled these issues as well, in sort of a thoughtful, meaningful way like we want to, how they've gone about doing that. So yeah, I'm just.
I mean, I think part of it, like, I would think like, you know, one way, and I don't know if that's a village-wide way, but it would be like having sort of resources available to local real estate agents, you know, that say, here we have these cultural, you know, these community there, because we do have pockets of immigrants and pockets of other cultures with, you know, like churches and different things that appeal to different communities. And I don't know that they're always, you know, promoted.
Mm-hmm.
So there is sort of the promotion of the cultural aspects that, so people, oh, when I'm coming from out of state or somewhere else where I'm not familiar with these neighborhoods, and you see one neighborhood has some of these cultural amenities, you then look for that.
Okay.
Great. Well, in the interest of time, I would like to move on, but if anyone else had one last thought on this, I don't want to rush us.
I'll just reiterate, as I mentioned in the previous meetings, you can always email comments after the meeting if you think of something afterwards, or if you didn't have, you know, your thoughts fully prepared for tonight. Jackie and I welcome those comments at any point in the process. So whether it's, you know, live during this meeting or after the fact, feel free to continue to send us those comments, because we'll be, you know, tightening these chapters up over the next month.
Yeah.
I have one kind of big, like, sort of general question. We're referencing other plans and studies the village has done over the last few years. I'm just wondering how the vision plan differs from our comprehensive plan, and whether we really need both. Since the state requires us to have an updated comprehensive plan, do we really need to have a vision plan, and which kind of is the most important? And I think the comprehensive plan should be primary, and it should include the vision that we have. I don't know, it just seems like we have a lot of plans on the shelf with to-do lists that never get any attention paid to them. So I think it must be confusing for staff as well as for elected officials.
I 100% agree with you, Barbara. And I know Jackie and I talked about this, and I'm not sure if it's in here as a recommendation anywhere, but we talked about at least aligning those two, perhaps at their next update. I was given the direction that we needed to include the 2025 vision information within here. I agree. I think it's confusing to have multiple plans with potentially conflicting recommendations in there. So we are working with the vision statement because it is adopted. But I believe Jackie and I discussed potentially making a recommendation to perhaps update that, you know, maybe in 2030 along with the comprehensive plan next time, so that we only have one document. And so point well taken. Whether or not we can, you know, make that work, we'll see. But the vision document is something led by the village board through the village manager's office, whereas this plan is, you know, state required, led through the plan commission, the planning development office. So I 100% agree. Staff needs to have one document reference, and I hope that we can make that work soon.
Okay. I've got lots of other little things, but they're the kind of things I can just email to you, Bart, afterwards.
Okay.
Great. With that, I will take us to the land use chapter. Because this chapter is organized a little bit differently than the other chapters, I did want to provide a really quick overview of the land use chapter. So that starts off with the vision statement, which was coming from our 2025 vision. The chapter also outlines existing land uses, so what land use categories are currently present in the village, and then showing those on a map. The chapter also provides an analysis of development trends that I'm sure you all saw, and some land use projections. We will finish those land use projections once we have the mapping done. But as was mentioned earlier, because population projections are relatively flat, we're not envisioning a huge need for land use, at least based on population projections. The chapter will also include a future land use map. This is something that is required by state statutes. And for some reason, your current plan does not actually include a future land use map. So we've been working with BART, and we will be working with the village's mapping contractor to develop a future land use map to be included in this version of the comprehensive plan. So that, well, I'll talk about that a bit later, but basically showing a desired future land use pattern for the village. Chapter also addresses recommendations for the central district. Naturally, this is the area of the village where we're anticipating change happening. And so putting special focus on that area. Includes our areas susceptible to change map, which we can talk about shortly, and outlines goals, recommendations, and objectives. So wanted to share with you the areas susceptible to change map. So this is an analysis that we put together in cooperation with staff. It's really just taking a look at where we would expect development pressure to occur. So this map this map is not a Village of Shorewood policy. This is not identifying where the village wants to see redevelopment happen, but rather it's showing areas that in our analysis, we would envision as being more susceptible to development pressure, redevelopment pressure, and change. So generally these areas were either surface parking lots, underdeveloped sites, maybe they had a lot of parking in the front, single-story development, and in some cases, underutilized or outdated buildings. And so these are the areas that we would think would most likely see that development pressure to redevelop or infill develop. Those are the red areas. And then on the map, you also see yellow areas. So these are those adjacent residential areas next to the commercial corridor that we would expect to be the most impacted by those changes. So the draft plan, as you probably saw, outlines a number of different strategies for mitigating change, development impacts on those adjacent residential areas. And this is just a tool that we're using to kind of understand what the future land use for Shorewood could be. Again, not the policy, but just kind of understanding the landscape that we're working with. Did anyone have any questions right away about this map before I move on?
I have just a couple. I think it would be good for you to maybe discuss this a little further with Bart, because there are a couple, I mean, everything is, I guess, what's the saying? Everybody has a price, or everything's available for a certain price. But there has been some redevelopment or renovations at some of these locations in red that I think makes them less susceptible to change. For example, on the east end of Capitol, the Shorewood Animal Hospital is just completing exterior and interior renovation. So they're in Stoll and Capitol. So I think they'd probably be less susceptible to change. The Corner Bakery and the Culvers are owned, I think, by the same owners, or operated by the same owners. And they have probably fared better than most during the COVID crisis, because they have drive-throughs, and we've all seen lines on Oakland Avenue of cars waiting to, get in and pick up dinner. So I don't know, even though they have big surface parking lots, I don't know why they would, want to move. So you just might want to relook at some of those individual spots that look like they, are either underutilized or, have a lot of surface parking lot, but maybe are really successful and have reasons to stay longer than you might think.
Mm-hmm. And this could be a bit of a longer term view also. You might have that opinion now, but in 5 years it's still a surface lot and might be something that we want different, or that someone's willing to pay for.
Yeah, and I was going to just quickly, and we didn't, I specifically told Jackie when we discussed it, I didn't want to, pick and choose which surface lots we think are thriving or not thriving. We just generally said if there's surface parking there in a dense village that generally doesn't, desire surface parking, I think it should be identified. So we didn't go through, to Barbara's point, we didn't go through and say, oh, okay, we have the Shorewood Animal Hospital, they just put a renovation on there. and they probably want to keep their parking. We're just saying to Teresa's point, you know, in 5 to 10 years, who knows what's going to happen, but that particular site is quote unquote undeveloped in terms of what the zoning code would allow. Surface parking is not desired. And so we did not specifically go through each of these red sites and identify which, you know, businesses or buildings we thought were, you know,
Underperforming or
whatnot.
blighted.
Yeah, we just went through and said, if there's surface parking, I think it's worth, you know, including on the map. It's a long-term view, like Therese said. This is not intended to drive change. This is just kind of a, you know, a heads up. President Rosick actually requested this early on in the process, that she, you know, identified that in Milwaukee they did this. So using that direction, we just kind of made some general statements about how to pick these parks. There's the response, at least into how this was developed.
Okay, just keep in mind when you say surface parking lots are not attractive, they're attractive for women. There have been a lot of articles recently about unsafe parking decks. I've parked in a lot downtown over 25 years, and you know there have been a lot of crime. It's like one of the top places for crime. So surface parking lots may not seem like a great idea, but they're a lot safer than some alternatives.
Acknowledged, correct. We're not necessarily recommending ramps anywhere, you know, but acknowledged surface parking lots sometimes are beneficial.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. I just wanted to highlight a few of the land use recommendations that we added to the plan. So these are not in your current plan, or they perhaps are touched on in your current plan, and we provided some more detail on some of these. One is the idea of encouraging flexible uses in buildings to respond to market shifts or lifestyle shifts. Another was to engage in a form-based corridor planning study of Capitol and Oakland. That's a process, and I'm sure you read in the plan, where you do visioning with the community, very public engagement heavy process. And from there, once you understand your vision for the corridor, you can develop highly detailed form-based standards based on the surrounding context for each block. We've also recommended implementing strategies for buffering existing neighborhoods from new development. I did talk about that briefly before. Requiring pedestrian-oriented design in redevelopment projects, and then ensuring that redevelopment meets community goals. And I will talk about that in a little bit. The plan is also includes a draft or a working version of the future land use map. And I just want to take a moment to talk about what the future land use map is, since your current plan does not have it. It's basically, what it does is it identifies a recommended or desired future land use for each parcel throughout the village. So you'll see on the draft future land use map when it's complete that for the most part in those single family and 2-family areas of the village, you would not see change in land use recommended for those areas. So those areas we absolutely envision staying the same. Future land use, while it looks kind of like a zoning map, it is not a zoning map and it is different. However, it's an important map to include in your plan because per state statutes, all zoning changes need to be consistent with your adopted future land use map. And so that's the way that the comp plan actually has teeth. And so it's a really important map to spend some time with and make sure you get right, because it will be guiding future changes to zoning. Typically in comp plans, we will actually correlate specific future land use categories to specific village zoning districts as well. So that makes implementation of the comp plan a little bit easier. So generally at a comprehensive plan level, the future land use categories will address things like general land uses desired within those categories, character, principles, other desired objectives for those land use categories. But it's really in zoning where we'll get into very specific standards, specific uses that are conditional, prohibited, or permitted, and those like very specific details. Or if you have a form-based code, for example, that's where all those specific requirements would live. And then just finally wanted to add that lots of times communities will update their comprehensive plan and lay out all these objectives that they want to accomplish, and then realize that you actually need to make some zoning amendments in order to implement the comp plan. So perhaps they need a new zoning district because their current array of districts doesn't quite get them where they need to be in order to implement their comp plan. So right here, we've got our very rough concept for the future land use map. So what you're looking at here is somewhat recent land use map for the village of Shorewood. So the colors on this map generally refer to existing land use map, but we're using that as a starting point for developing our future land use map. As I mentioned before, not a lot of change. We're not really looking at the neighborhoods because we're not expecting a lot of changes in those neighborhoods. Although once we do get into the deeper mapping, there may be some specific parcels that we need to take a closer look at. So what we've tried to accomplish here is to provide a clearer land use direction for the areas where we might expect, or we do expect, a land use change to occur. So that's specifically on Oakland and on Capitol. And as you read in the plan, we've really just, instead of just throwing a mixed use category across all of these two corridors, we've really tried to break it down into something more specific that helps the village accomplish the goals that they're trying to accomplish. So this is a draft. You know, we'd love to hear from you more thoughts on how well you think we did, and we want to continue to refine this with you. You know, really what we've done here is developed 4 different really character-based mixed use, well, I should say 3 of them are mixed use districts and 1 of them is mostly residential.
I have a question.
Yes.
So the central core mixed use, I understand the block there that goes from Shorewood Boulevard north to Capitol, and then east and west boundaries are Murray and Oakland. But the little foot that goes out to the left, the lower left, is there a tall building there that I'm not thinking about that would justify 6 to 8 stories?
What are you talking
Because
about?
it seems to me the North Shore Bank building, well, maybe if that whole building covered that block and was that tall.
So this was actually a pretty rough pass based on looking at the air photo and looking at your central district master plan. So we'll take another look at that and make sure that's the right breaking point for the district. Could you tell me again where that was, on the far east part of the district right here?
It's right there. It's the block that starts, I was just looking Capitol Drive south to Shorewood Boulevard, with the east-west boundaries being Oakland and Murray. To take that farther south, I would take a look at that. You've got, it looks like a block farther south of that to Beverly, almost on both sides of Oakland, being 6 to 8 stories.
Mm-hmm.
So you're suggesting to stop it at Shorewood? Is that?
That's what my feeling would be, and make it the mixed street use that goes 4 to 5, or even this.
That's probably something worth looking at. As Jackie pointed out, we haven't had a chance to sit down together and discuss the fine grain of that. I've got a few of those thoughts myself, but point well taken. I think during Shorewood Boulevard, the lower end of that might make some sense.
But I think our current zoning allows for those taller buildings within, so many feet from the intersection of Capitol and Oakland. And an exception was made for the Light Horse. And then again, an exception made for the Mosaic, which again, you know all about the controversy. So I think that Trustee Stokbrand has a good point that we're starting to get a little further away from that intersection. And you don't want to know how many exclamation points I put next to no where it says 6 to 8 stories. But I also wanted to know, it doesn't really specify in that high density multifamily residential on South Oakland, how many stories are envisioned for that section.
Yeah, that's a good question. We didn't really talk about that in the plan. I think currently your zoning would allow us 4 to 5 stories. So I think that's kind of what I had in mind, but I'd love to hear the Plan Commission's thoughts on that.
Okay. And what you said, how if we make future zoning changes, they have to match this future land use map. We may be doing it the other way around. We want to change zoning, and that may not happen until after this comp plan is done. So then do we just go back and change the land use map?
Well, what I was recommending is doing the comp plan first and then changing zoning, which sounds like you guys are on the right path. It is possible to amend the comprehensive plan discussions take you in down another path. Obviously, we'll try to get it right the first time and find the right recommended heights and combinations of land uses.
Yeah, because I mean, the Main Street mixed use right now, it says 4 to 5 stories. I would rather have that be 2 to 4 stories. I mean, if you're looking for a good use of a redeveloped mixed use building on the northeast corner or northwest corner of Oakland and Downer, the former Hayek's Pharmacy was completely renovated, both floors, apartments above, retail or restaurant below. And, you know, it fits in the neighborhood, and that kind of development, I think people love. But if you're going to take something down and put it 5 stories, it's not going to fit with that kind of Main Street character, community character that we're trying to preserve, that people want.
I would agree. Just looking around, it seems like 4 stories is much more common in Shorewood than 5. And I know it's just a difference of 1 number, but Bart probably knows better than I do. To add the 5, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't have the history of the last Central District Master Planning process. I'm sure many of you might. But there were some thoughts in there of, you know, 5 stories or otherwise. But once again, if this body wants to, you know, by consensus recommend nothing more than 2 to 4 in particular districts, this would be the place to do it. And at that point, then we would utilize the comprehensive plan to update the zoning code. So if there's a zoning district right now within one of these potentially 2 to 4 story areas that allows for a 5th story, that would be the reference point that we would say to modify that zoning down to 4 stories. I'm not saying that, you know, needs to be the case, but just to your point, Barbara, this would be the place where we would identify those maximums, and then later on we update the zoning, match that up with that. So to Jackie's point, I agree. This is the process direction I would be seeking within this particular review right now.
Okay.
So is this the sort of thing where we should go around the table and see if there's a consensus to make everything that's 4 to 5 here on mixed street use, Main Street mixed use, and suburban mixed use? Do we want to change it from 4 to 5 to 2 to 4, or?
I do.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, if that is in fact the direction, I'd be happy to hear that. It's very clear to us at that point. We can then utilize that to tell you what that means in terms of other goals, whether that is a pro or con for other things. But in terms of land use, this is the chapter where we want to hear the discussion, and then we'll work that throughout the remainder of the chapter. So I've heard at least 2 or 3. I've seen a few head nods. If there's anyone objecting, maybe now would be the time to perhaps, even if it's a little, voice some hesitation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I've got a little hesitation. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. So we're making a decision on building height based on, you know, it feels a little bit like what we think a neighborhood should feel like. And there's a financial part of this, that no developer would come in and build a 2-story building because they'll never make any money off of it. So there has to be a balance between, you know, a feasible business plan for development. We also have an ask from President Rosick that we need to increase the amount of housing in the village in order to hold our taxes down. Those 2 things kind of go against this desire for a low building height village. So I'm more a proponent of it. It needs to make sense. It needs to fit. It needs to be financially viable, and it needs to help hold down taxes in our neighborhoods. You know,
Yeah, I'd rather not limit us either. That's my opinion.
Sorry?
I agree with you.
Thanks, Dan.
Well, I don't think we're saying 2, it's 2 to 4. So I guess what we're quibbling over, it sounds to me, is between 4 and 5.
Right.
Is that's what I understood.
That was my
We were reducing the 5 to 4.
Right. And a 2-story might be more renovation of an existing building, whereas a 4 would be a new redevelopment project.
I thought 4 was always was the ceiling unless you had an exception,
I
right?
don't know. It says 4 to 5 in the zoning code.
In the zoning code, certain areas are 4 to 5, certain areas are, I should say, certain areas are up to 5, in other areas it's up to 4. So it's not consistent throughout the entire corridor. There are areas that allow for 5, there are areas that allow for 4. I would argue I would like to have that more clear and clean in the new zoning updates that we hope to do after this fact. So if the particular Main Street blue districts are what potentially the Plan Commission and the board would like to see as 4, then the zoning of those districts, in my mind, should correlate. In exchange for that, perhaps the purple, if I'm getting my colors right, in the center, could allow for perhaps 5 or 6. That would give opportunity for some of those more impactful housing projects that would balance the goal of needing new units or things like that. So it's not an easy decision or choice, but the land use chapter essentially is giving us the framework to work within so that these other goals and other chapters, economic development, housing, and otherwise fit with that land use. So it's not a, I think it's not a clean decision to Teresa's point. Like, we have to be able to balance, do we want to lower taxes by having additional development? Then you're probably going to need a place where some more density is allowed. This would be the place to identify this is where we think some density is acceptable. But if those blue areas are not where you want them to be, that's where we would then change the zoning to reflect that.
And if I could just add to, I just lost my thought. I was just going to say that I wanted to encourage you to keep a range on there. Now, if we want to bring it from 5 to 4, I've got no problem with that. But I like the idea of keeping a range at the comp plan level, because if the village does undertake a form-based zoning planning process, you may find, based on the context of specific buildings, one building might want to be on the higher end of that, and another building perhaps would want to be on the lower end of that based on the surrounding context. So if you have a range in your comp plan, that enables you to keep making those adjustments or have standards like that that are specific to the context of the building.
Bart, I have one question for you. One multi-family housing area is on the east side of Wilson Drive. So when I think of properties that might be available either for renovation or redevelopment, I think of those as a possibility because they're already, I don't know if those are 4 families or 6 or 8 families, but we don't really have those as a future land use. And I'm just wondering if we're just keeping that off of any primarily residential areas.
I'm not sure I followed that, Bart. Did you catch that?
I think if I understand the question correctly, so, and Jackie and I talked about this. So I think there's a clear area for low density residential, which would be single family and duplex. There's a higher density, which could be 4 to 5 story building, 60 unit, whatever. But I think there also is a middle range for like that 4 to 10 unit kind of building that you're talking about in Wilson, where I would medium density residential. Because I think Wilson Drive is a unique corridor that we have that does have that. It's not low density, it's not high density. So I would advocate for the consideration of a third, residential density category, and I would put it on the Wilson Drive corridor.
Right. I mean, I know people like those apartments because they're not expensive from what I understand. And they've got a great view of the greenery across the street. It's just that if they're 2-story or redeveloped to 3 or 4, the neighbors may not like that, but I just thought maybe that's something we shouldn't forget about that section.
Great. Agreed.
I don't know if this is like something you address now or then when we talk about zoning. One of the things that I see that's very different, like used to live in California. And so like one of the biggest things that people always talked about when they were talking about zoning and construction is always about light and views. So like, to me, I wouldn't lump in the Capitol Drive developments the same as Oakland just because the sun goes east-west. I would say, like, and that was one of the complaints, I think, from a lot of people about that whole metro market and 6-story structure was the light loss. So I would treat those a little bit differently, but I don't know if this is when you talk about that.
A great question. We certainly could mix or break up the 2 different blue areas that are Main Street mixed use and treat them differently. I'd have to do a little more research into how that might play out at the comp plan level or for zoning, but I think that's a great point.
I think the specifics of that would play themselves out in a form-based code where you might say you can't have a building of a certain bulk above a certain story, right? So maybe your first and second story can be continuous development along the street, but then your third or fourth have to be, no more than 50 feet wide or something, so that allows the light to pop through throughout the day. So the form-based code really does have that fine-grained detail opportunity. So yeah, whether this map needs to reflect that or whether the zoning details will spell that out as perhaps a question for us to confirm.
Yeah, to look into that.
And then one of my questions was in the zoning choices, what do you do with like accessory dwellings? I know that we have some. Are they all duplexes? How are they zoned?
Art, I'll defer to you on that one.
How are accessory dwelling units zoned? Is that the question?
Yeah, does that?
So yeah, right now zoning does not allow for them, but we could modify the zoning chapter to allow for them with certain regulations within the 1 and 2 family district. So for reference, Wauwatosa did this in 2019 and actually reviewed their ordinance this week actually, because I had a question on it. So it just allows within that district to have an accessory dwelling unit with certain parameters. So it needs to be, I think it's 49% of the current unit or 600 square feet, whichever's less. There's height restrictions on them. So it just builds into the existing 1 and 2 family districts a certain set of regulations that says if you meet these other things, you can have an accessory dwelling unit. So I think that's probably more of a housing chapter recommendation, not a land use one. But it's worth continuing to mention because I think it's something that we definitely need to tackle soon. I'm getting questions on them now because I think people are more familiar with them. And I think the requests are perhaps valid. So I would suggest in the housing chapter to make sure that we have that as a clear recommendation.
Bart, does Tosa have wider lots than Shorewood? Because that's one of the only restrictions I can think of offhand is because our lots are so narrow, adding like say a housing unit above a garage or in a back, a little tricky in Shorewood, except on, some of those larger lots on Lake Drive.
Yeah, I would never advocate for one community taking someone else's zoning chapter and just, adopting it outright. We would need to look at that kind of detail. I'm suggesting that it didn't change the low density land use category by adding that additional dwelling unit. They still maintained it as a low density district with just that additional ability to build a smaller ADU in the back, but it's still classified as a low density residential district in the land use chapter.
Okay.
Jackie, can I ask you one sort of a definition question?
Absolutely.
Can you walk me through the differences between a multifamily unit and a condo? Because
Yeah, I think I'm glad you asked that. So multifamily is a general term for any building that has 3 or more units in it.
Okay.
And condo is actually an ownership structure. So that's actually, in most condo situations, the resident of the condo is also the owner of the unit. So most condos would be considered an owner-occupied unit. So it's not necessarily a single-family home, but it's basically an apartment that is owner-occupied in a lot of cases.
Okay.
And from a land use map, I've discussed this with Jackie too. From a land use mapping perspective, I don't think condo is a classification that we would need to identify. If we wanted to have a map on owner occupancy, in the housing chapter or somewhere else, that would make more sense. So maybe we could identify where renters versus owner occupancy is there. But to me, it's not a land use classification. It's either multifamily, low density, high density, et cetera. So for what I think we'll be tackling that in the revised mapping, I don't necessarily think that a condo future land use is a relevant category.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, villages and cities can't regulate based on ownership. So you could not pass a rule saying all new multifamily needs to be condos, because that's actually illegal. So we have to stay away from that kind of language in this chapter.
Okay.
I think it's useful. I had no idea those were condos. I thought those were just apartments. I
Okay.
mean, I think it's useful to know that. I know there's those whole section on Lake Drive that's also condominiums. It's different because if you say multifamily, I think in your head you automatically assume non-owner occupied. I do, at least. So it's helpful for me to understand where there's more owner occupied housing. And I know you're saying that maybe that would just be in a separate housing map, but it's useful in this map to me also. Just me.
Oh, no, I agree. It was a matter of curiosity. I just didn't know. Because of some of these places that are listed as condos, specifically, south of Kensington, north of Lake Bluff, east side of Oakland, I guess I had always thought that they were more, I'd sort of call them apartments, but. Okay.
All right. So my next few slides are just walking us through each of those land use categories on this map, but I feel like perhaps we've kind of covered it. Did anyone want to talk more about these categories? Because I'm happy to go through those slides, but I don't want to
confirm, we can change these designations going forward if we're not comfortable.
Yep.
Do we want the east side of Oakland Avenue still to be 6 to 8 floors?
No.
Opposite the Mosaic and the Light Horse? Do we want an 8-story? Do we want zoning, or do we want to say in our comprehensive plan that we will allow an 8-story building? Is this where we say no?
I support that or vote for that ever.
I mean, you looking to vote here? Or what do you need from us for direction?
So maybe I should walk us through the categories, and then if you are all, let's talk about whether we're in agreement with the draft language that we have for each one of these.
Okay.
So starting with our central core, this is our area where I started with kind of aggressively putting us at 6 to 8 stories, but I did recognize that we probably get pressure, as Bart mentioned, to scale it back in other areas of the village. And so I thought if there is an area where you're going to have increased housing or greater density, this would be the area, especially considering that there is existing development of that scale there now. This is, I think the slide kind of says it all. So I'd love to hear from all of you about, thoughts on the boundary, knowing that Bart and I are going to do a deeper dive on this after this conversation. But if you've got immediate thoughts about where that boundary is, we'd love to hear them. And then your thoughts on the height.
So I would not extend 6 to 8 stories beyond the southeast corner of Oakland and Capitol. I don't see us putting 8 stories anywhere except next to that the former North Shore Bank building. Is that correct? And the Fountain Blue on the other side, is that 8?
I'm not sure. So you're talking
about that one block that already has that kind of height, you would limit that story level to that block, is what I'm hearing.
The 6 to 8, I don't see it going beyond that one block, but.
I agree with Trustee Stokbrand.
Say the same thing about the east side of Oakland Avenue going up to, what is that, Olive?
Correct.
Right where Associated Bank, Camp Bar, school.
I mean, I think, yeah, I agree, Eric. I think 5 would be a stretch there.
I just think that gets us directly into the problems and, frankly, the reason for the turnover of the vast majority of the old board that, they put up 6-story buildings in places that people did not want them.
And I think Teresa had good points. We don't want to say to people that we don't want you to come here and develop, but it looks to me like we've got a lot of really high quality 4-story buildings that have worked on the north end of Oakland Avenue. They've come in, they've done it without having to build 6 stories, and certainly not 8. I just don't see 8. Other than that one where there's already a space and it's visually we're accustomed to it. I don't know. I'm making a judgment based on aesthetics though, and maybe that's not the way to do planning.
But Trustee Oakbrand, that's also the feedback that we've gotten from the public, from the stakeholder meetings in this process. Not just, the sentiment that we've heard 6 years ago when the mosaic went up, but I think that was just all echoed with the comments that we've seen, that people, want to keep the community character that we have. We want to have better building materials, and we don't want to have canyons down our main street. So I think keeping it clustered around that main intersection makes perfect sense.
And I think that if you look at places like, for example, Whitefish Bay, that all of that new development, that housing development on Silver Spring, just behind, where Fox Point Theater is and all of that, none of that is 6 to 8 stories tall. That is, I believe, 3, maybe 4 max.
Oh, those are taller.
There's no way those are 8 stories or 6 stories.
They're more than 4.
I would be.
I'm gonna have to go drive by. Dan,
Hop in my car.
Field trip.
All right, I'll bet you a beer one day that those are not.
Yeah, I think they're 4.
But what I'm saying is that it's just, yes, Trustee Stokebrand, I know that it's aesthetics, but aesthetics are a lot of the reasons that people move places.
Right.
I mean, I have no problem saying that we don't want to do it because it's ugly and it doesn't match all the other things that we have here. And I'm comfortable saying that, even if it means that, a developer doesn't get to put a 6-story building in, put it somewhere else.
We're saying bring this boundary down, and then I guess I didn't catch how far south you wanted to take it. Just keep it down to Elmdale Court, or where was like the northern boundary envisioned here?
I just don't know what.
I
Knowing
would say 4 to 5 stories. No, nothing north of Capitol.
Oh, well, you mean the block frontage on Capitol, but nothing.
Yeah, because otherwise you're gutting all of the properties, the old Wells Fargo, you're gutting the corner, which Katz finally let somebody rent. And the whole entire east side of Oakland Avenue are all, I think, appropriately sized, either, coffee shops or daycare or, what I would, again, multifamily units. I just don't see where you put a 6-story building, a 5-story building anywhere north of Capitol Drive without heads rolling.
Mm-hmm.
And with adjacent with accompanying parking and traffic issues as well.
Right, unless they have the money to dig down that deep and make underground parking.
Right.
They're just going to come to the village for money anyways.
So is this how you become labeled the Anti-Development Plan Commission?
Yeah.
I just want to know, because I haven't done this before. So if we change if we put this in the comprehensive plan, our recommendation going forward is we do not want anything more than 4 stories on Oakland Avenue north of Capitol.
The residents would throw a parade for us.
Yeah, I think you could call it anti-development, or you could call it pro-public input.
Yes,
Yeah.
pedestrian scale development is what it is.
Well, what I would just want to make a few comments. I think one is that I would say there certainly were people in the public input that we received that do want to see more density. So we knew right away after we collected all the public input that whatever map we put out, we were going to be making somebody unhappy. So that being said, this plan is not intended to, do something that's going to be against what the majority of residents want to see happen. I am pushing you a bit on this 6 to 8 stories. It's not currently in your zoning code. So if you're taking this back from 6 to 8 stories back down to 5, we're just ending up where we currently are. So I don't think you should feel like you're anti-development by not changing the zoning. Now, if you're bringing it down from lower than from where you currently are, that would be a policy change that you might want to just be aware of.
Is there a way to make it a greater range? Can you case by case?
4? I'm okay with 1 to 4.
Well, the current minimum is 2 stories on Oakland.
Pardon? Can you say that again?
The current minimum building height is 2 stories, so it's 2 to 4.
Mm-hmm.
And that the higher buildings, it was within so many 100 feet of that main intersection. So again, they made an exception for the light horse and then kind of just threw the book out the window when they built the mosaic.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's another thing too. I think this future land use map should acknowledge the fact that there are buildings that are taller than 4 stories currently north of Capitol Drive too. So we're, I don't think this plan should suggest down planning those buildings that are already there. So we should acknowledge that existing land use pattern and heights that are there now.
Right, but we want to make it clear that we don't want any more 6-story buildings north of Capitol.
I don't know if that's true.
Well,
Isn't that what?
I disagree with that too. I mean, we have, am I wrong that the majority of space north of Capitol is taken up, not majority of space. There's more space taken up north of Capitol by 6-story buildings than there is south of Capitol.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, I don't remember exactly what public comment we heard it on, but there was a comment that the 6-story that is currently north of Capitol perhaps looked less contextual because it's only on the west side. And there was discussion of if there was an opportunity to balance it on the east side, that therefore the district might actually look more cohesive rather than if you have 2 stories versus 6 stories as your potential future land use, you were always going to have that, stark dichotomy. So I know that came out, whether it was in the virtual public meeting or elsewhere. So I think that's perhaps part of where this particular boundary came from, was that there are 6-story buildings in there. I know that those are controversial and maybe 6 stories is not the answer. Maybe 4 stories would help balance them out. I'm just kind of giving some justification as to where this particular, border was drawn around. It was in part, I think, to help contextualize what had already taken place. So at this point, I don't want to create non-conforming structures within this plan. So the zoning of those allow the 6 stories. I would prefer to not, start down zoning things to make non-conforming structures. But if perhaps the height within that central core mixed use needs to go down to 4 or 5, this is the place to discuss it. Maybe 6 to 8 isn't what we're hearing, but I think that was the justification perhaps for this particular boundary.
Yeah, basically reflecting where tall buildings were already present. But this is the place to have that conversation about what heights we want to see, and even if we want to add another category, that's something that we can talk about too.
My vote would be to leave it whatever the current zoning is, and then people can always apply for an exception, right? So I'd rather have any sort of exception go through more of a vetting process than to decide right now anything and everything that's above the current zoning is okay just because it's already been allowed on the other side. So that's my vote.
I would agree because, so the mosaic and the light horse were granted a special use permit to go to 6, right?
Land development district zoning, correct.
So I would agree with Sangeeta, Commissioner Patel. Do we want to go around the table then? For the central core mixed use, it's currently, other than the southeast corner, is this correct? It's currently up to 4 floors, and then you'd have to go through the vetting process for a special use.
To add on to that, where do we stand on, do we like where the central core mixed use boundaries are? Do we agree that they go up to Olive and down, that still seems to be a bit on the table as well.
Yeah.
Perhaps less than, the 8 argument, but. it's
Yeah,
definitely.
I would say everything's on the table, just to be clear. In this conversation or in the next month or at the next public hearing, we're not at a stage where this plan is, in any form of a final draft. So everything's on the table. I just want to make that point clear.
Mhm.
Well, does the area south of the fitness center on the west side of Oakland, south of the high school and the fitness center, is that currently part of that 4 to 5 story zoning?
I don't
I
have
think
the
it's in the-
code in front
Yeah.
of me.
That goes down to, looks like Beverly.
I think that's 4 stories, but we'd have to double check that.
Right now, it looks like it's in the 6 to 8 stories. That's why I suggested we end that at Shorewood Boulevard, the central core mixed use. On the south,
Right.
I think the southern border should go no farther than Shorewood Boulevard. And I would ask that it go no farther north than Capitol. And if someone wants to put something taller in there beyond our 4-story current zoning, that they have to come and do, as Commissioner Patel suggested, you have to apply for a special use permit.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, after going to every public meeting in 2014 and getting signatures on petitions, 6 stories was very unpopular for the Mosaic. And I think that if we did a zoning code that allowed 6 to 8 stories, we would be going against what the public input has been back then and is now.
I guess the thing that's really frustrating to me is when we've talked about closing some of these TIDs, we're not really going to get that much of a bump so that we can reduce our property tax levy. It seems to me it was sold as something that's maybe going to deliver a little bit for a year or two. That's what's frustrating to me. Besides the lack, that it doesn't fit in with the character of the village. I mean, I want to see development too done wisely and in the character of the building. But it just does seem to me like we have to learn from mistakes. So how do we move forward here, Bart?
I mean, I think I've heard a legitimate amount of conversation on height for the time being. I'll just remind everyone that this is just one chapter. And so your decisions on height and aesthetics and whatnot do impact the ability for whether that's taxes or whether that's affordable housing or whether that's other things. So it's our job, Jackie and I's, to, I definitely think we've heard what you've said on this particular chapter. We'll just make sure that lines up with other things and making sensible recommendations of how to move forward.
And like you said, we have another kick at this can, right?
We've got plenty. Yes. I would argue this is the very first step in this process. So we've taken, 3 to 4 months to get some input and to develop this, very rough draft. There'll be plenty of opportunity to continue to refine it. So I don't want to belabor the point because I think we've heard at least a legitimate sentiment at this point. So I'm happy with the conversation. I appreciate everyone's perspectives.
Can I ask just a real quick procedure question?
Sure.
Looking down the road, let's just say we stay, that Dan and Teresa, that they stay where they are and we stay where we are. How do we finalize this? Is this a vote? Is this a?
Well, I'll remind everyone, the Plan Commission, you're the recommending body of the plan. So we'll need a favorable recommendation to the Plan Commission. So if it, ends up passing 5-2 with that, just keep in mind the board is the final authority. So
sure,
they could also change it. So, but yeah, we will eventually need to have, votes on these particular matters so that we can give them a recommendation of what the consensus was by the Plan Commission.
Okay.
And we can always include, reasons for dissent. We put that in the minutes typically. So
sure. Okay.
Perspective will be documented, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm just getting a procedure question.
Yep.
Great. I will keep us going.
All right. Bart, did you have a question about that next section, that central district risk recommendations? It just seems that with COVID, so much of that doesn't even make sense anymore as far as adding new retail space. I don't know if if we want to encourage more mixed use development at this point or not.
I mean, to me, that balances the desire to be a walkable community. You need places to walk to and reasons to walk. So I would hesitate to draft a 20-year comprehensive plan based on a current, health situation. I think, acknowledging the changing atmosphere of retail through internet sales perhaps might be a more pressing question. But within the last Central District Master Plan, we did acknowledge that by suggesting that we needed to encourage retailers to have that presence so that they would be, financially flexible on that stuff. So I would still advocate for creating a mixed use walkable district and then, working with economic development chapter on how to make those businesses financially feasible, whether it's, whether it's local destinations that aren't as impacted by, the Amazons of the world. But land use chapter, I still think a mixed use walkable district is probably what I've heard the most desire for.
I agree. And I think the mixed use category is the most like recession proof or trend proof or pandemic proof, because it does allow flexibility based on what lifestyle or health trends are doing. So I think it's something that gives you a lot of flexibility to respond to different changes and challenges. And it's not necessarily saying we're all in on retail only. So we'll try to make that clear in the plan too.
Okay.
All right, so our other category was the Main Street mixed use category. Just real briefly, this is kind of more of a village Main Street character. In some locations, we have narrower streets, and so that kind of respects that, and being more sensitive to surrounding residential areas, particularly in these districts. I think we're hovering around 4 stories, hovering around 5 stories in this for this district, and we'll continue to look at where those boundaries are. Anybody have any thoughts on this one before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, this is the one, I've said this over the last couple of years, that this is the one area I would like to rezone. Again, 2 to 4 stories maximum. We have a mix of residences right on Oakland, or rather right on Capitol Drive there. And it's a smaller, narrower street. We've got 2 schools, we have a church. It's just a different character than the entertainment district on Capitol, or rather on Oakland.
So you're referring to the Capitol Drive east of Murray Avenue district, is that correct, Barbara?
Yes.
And so right now I believe it's zone B3, which lines up more with Capitol. So I think the recommendation here would be to actually to zone it more consistent with the smaller scale Oakland, but you're suggesting an even smaller scale. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think that 4 to 5 stories are too many. I know we've got a few existing older apartment buildings there, but anything newer, we've got the 1-story buildings, City Market, and some of the other buildings that have been redone. I don't want to put something in that's going to be out of character. And when the zoning was redone several years ago, some of those properties were excluded because they are single family homes. One north of Capitol and a couple of corners that are south of Capitol. So just to fit in the character of that neighborhood, that stretch, I think 4 to 5 stories is too high.
I would encourage you to consider 4 to 5 stories across from the school, and kind of across from those more commercial uses. I think that could be quite compatible there. That's my opinion.
Those buildings, some of the most character in the village. And again, that is one thing that residents have said over and over that they want to maintain, is that community character. And I just think any plan that comes out and says we're going to replace those, or we would like to replace them possibly with 4 to 5 stories, it's just not going to fly. It's not going to be.
What's the current zoning there from Murray East to Downer on Capitol? Is it 2 to 4?
No, it's 4 to 5, and that's why I would like to change it.
Oh, it's 4 to 5. So the The Anderson, is that the one, the Katz property?
Correct, yep.
That's 5.
I don't know offhand what that is. I don't have the zoning chapter in front of me. That was not the intention of tonight's meeting, to go parcel by parcel. But I believe it's actually 4 stories over there. I need to double check on that. Once again, I don't have it, so I apologize for not knowing that offhand. But yeah, there are several buildings that, push that quote unquote character. And I just want to reiterate, we had this conversation earlier in the virtual public hearing, that character and height are 2 different things. And so if there's a legitimate concern over height, whether that's through, lack of sunlight or things like that, that height is the actual issue, that's one thing. But if character is the issue, there are ways to design a 4-story building and to require it through, a form-based code or material requirements or things like that, that could complement that existing, pattern. So just want to remind us when we're talking about this, that character and height to me don't mean the same thing. They might sound like the same thing, but in terms of zoning and land use, they're very specific differences. So I just want to make sure that what we're presenting back to you is clear on those, variations. So I will double check the current zoning. I believe it's 4 over there right now.
Bart, can I chime in? I just want to encourage everybody, I know we're talking about one section right now for a really long time, but at the same time, we talked a ton about, I know Barbara, you talked a ton about affordability. And if we don't encourage this type of development, we're not going to have affordability here in the village. The only way to grow our tax base in the village is, I don't want to say the only way, but it's up. And to Bart's point, a 4 to 5 story building that's aesthetically pleasing could be great. And if we want development, there aren't going to be many developers in this environment that are going to come in, tear something down to build a 2 to 4 story building. That the economics just aren't there.
Well, again, I think with 2 stories, we're talking more about renovation, and 4 stories redevelopment. St. Robert's is a historic property. St. Robert's Church is kind of the jewel of that side of the village. And I would hate for it to be surrounded by taller buildings that diminish its stature, just like the church that's on west of Walgreens. So anyway, you've heard enough from me about that. You know what I think.
Perhaps we should go around the table. Mixed street use. I see, for some reason, in my mind in Shorewood, there's a lot of difference between the number of 4-story and 5-story buildings. I would support this Main Street mixed use if it was 2 to 4 stories instead of 4 to 5. Let's see, who are we going? And Barb says no. Sangeeta?
My opinion is I would leave it at the lower and look for people to ask for special use. I just feel like, just from our tenor of our discussion, I don't know how you would address it either in the code or here, but a lot of this sounds like the fights that happen in California over, once everything is developed, then you want to be a little bit more surgical in how you choose, rather than having blanket, like, oh, anyone can do a 5-story, anyone can do this, rather than having those blanket sort of allowances. Once you are sort of built up, most people want to do little surgical choices and have much more input on the individual things that go up at that point. So I'm wondering if there's a way to handle it that way, instead of allowing blanket 5 stories or blanket, and leave it at a lower end with special use or having to come in for permission.
Well, I agree with you, and I think the way that the comp plan can do that is to keep it as at a range of heights that are desirable, and then like a future zoning form-based planning process is where you would get surgical and really pin down where it makes sense to allow more and where it does not make sense to do that. And so I would encourage you in this conversation too, is if somebody's dead set against a certain height, we can bring it back, but I don't want to get overly hung up on the heights at this stage of the planning process.
I like the outline of the area. That's part of our commercial district. When you want to encourage more shopping, retail, mixed use things further down all the way to that gas station all the way to Downer. Right now it's a little lightly used and could use a little more livelihood going on there, some restaurants.
Yeah.
So really looking for mixed use in that space.
I agree. It seems to me that those few little houses along that street, while, I respect the people who live there, but, they're on one of the major arterials here. So yeah, I think that the boundary is good. The boundary, both of the blue boundaries are good. I would just maybe extend it to the east side of Oakland.
Again, I don't have a problem with the boundary. My issue is a height issue. I mean, I prefer the 2 to 4. I mean, the boundary, I live just off, just east of the boundary on Lake Bluff. And when I bought this house, I recognized that I lived close to a business district, and, that's the way it goes. But, that doesn't mean I want a 6-story building, 4 houses down from me, blocking everything, after 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Mhm.
And if that, if I get to fight that fight here, then that's where I'm going to fight it.
Right.
So are you speaking as a individual of the village, or are you representing the village on the plan commission?
I mean, we're all doing both.
Yeah.
He's making his angry face.
No. I mean, but we're all doing both. I mean, it's
Well, he represents a group of people, not just himself. It's all of those people that live along those
Right.
corridors that are
same
adjacent.
people that, when they came to us for Casa Corazon, when they were putting in, the daycare, they were concerned about all the increased traffic on those streets. I mean, I'm one of many people that live just east or just west of that corridor.
Mhm.
And the last time that those voices were heard would have been for the big developments farther south of me. And, I think the vast majority of those people were very clear about what they wanted. So sure, I'm speaking for both. That's why I'm here.
Great. I'm going to keep this going. I feel like I hear directions for 2 to 4 stories in those Main Street mixed use areas. But again, this is a continued conversation, so we will keep moving.
And clearly developers can drive down Oakland Avenue and see that exceptions have been made. And if they feel strongly enough about developing in our community, they can apply for the exemption, right?
I believe so. All right, our next category is the suburban mixed use category. This is an area that I'm sure if you walk over here, you see that Capitol Drive is much wider here. There's deeper setbacks for a lot of businesses. We have more auto-oriented uses. Given that this is where Capitol Drive starts to transition into Milwaukee, which has more auto-oriented uses there, acknowledging that this is a different character area of the village. Still want to see increased investment here, still want to see highest quality development, but it is a slightly different character. We put 4 to 5 stories here I put 4 to 5 stories here based on current zoning generally. I think that's appropriate, especially since there are areas I think here that could redevelop, and there aren't quite as many neighbors in some of these sites. But I'm interested in hearing your thoughts.
I would concur.
I mean, I also think this is less of a, and I know, Bart, this is less of a sunlight issue. All those residents, if you build something on Capitol Drive, no one lives there, and you're not missing anything if you live behind it.
Well, I don't know if that's true. If you look on the north side of Capitol Drive, right? I mean, you build big buildings that's blocking everybody's sunlight from the south.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I agree with you, Dan. Let's go short.
I mean, I think once again, the 2 to 4 stories, I just think that Shorewood, I don't know. It seems to me that we're fans of 2 to 4, generally speaking. We have 4 people here that seem to favor 2 to 4. And then people who want to go higher go for an exemption.
All right.
There's, I mean, there's already a bunch of 4 stories in that area. And you could put a 10-story building where Culver's is and nobody would notice. You know, it's.
I think if you have, is there a possibility of, you know, like, I understand the idea of, you know, a special exemption or going in for a permit. There's always a way to make it easier is to have like a sort of where it's, I don't know what the legal way to do it is, but you know, where it's more allowable, like you have the process in place already that, does that make sense? Like I forget how it's done, but it's not that it's harder, like, oh, I can't think of it now, but is a way to do it where it's not, the process is there, so you can, it's much easier to go through, where you just have to go through it, sort of like having to go through design review board versus having to go through a much longer process for special exemptions.
So the communities that I work in, or a lot of the communities that I work in, I should say, that have a system like that will have designated criteria and expectations for a process. You know, if you're going to request higher building, these are the 10 things you need to accomplish in your development. And there is like a formal process set up so that you go through that process to ensure that you're meeting the village's expectation. But I guess I haven't gone through the process in Shorewood, so I'm not sure if there's a specific, is it because there's no process set out for it, is why it's fuzzy for people to know when to approve it and when not to approve it?
So wouldn't you then designate differently? I guess for the comprehensive plan is what I'm saying is, I can see how you would do that in the zoning code and in the other part of it.
Got it.
But in the comprehensive plan, would you just color it differently?
If it was eligible for like a height exception, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I think so. I think, and again, I would encourage the comp plan to stay pretty general. So we might, allow up to X stories in this area, but then when it comes down to zoning, that's when you really like pin down. They have to go through the process, so they have to get the approval, because that's the appropriate channel for that.
Right. I guess I was just thinking you would say 2 to 4 stories. This is like this pink area or whatever the area is colored, exemptions allowed, versus areas where you say 2 to 4 and then you actually have to go through like a stronger.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So it's almost like a category, yeah, like a different color, like you said, where there might be flexibility considered for height, whereas in other categories, there might not be flexibility considered.
Right, or it's just a longer, harder process, which that you would deal with in the zoning or other procedural ways.
Yeah, I'd have to give that some more thought, but that is one.
Just if other communities have done that, that might be a way to handle both the issues that we're talking about.
I mean, I would encourage you to, if there's a longer process, trying to understand what the purpose of that process is. If it's because we're trying to get certain benefits from the public, for the public out of the development, is that why we're going through the process? Or is it because we want more public input?
I think it's that part that we put in there earlier about deference to residential neighbors, right? It was in the other, it was in one of the other things, but I think that that's what we're getting to. Once we're already built out, I think you have to give a deference to the residents when you're going for new development.
I see. So it's more of a public, having a more public input in the approval process.
Right. It's just allowing, like I said, I used to live in California. There was a lot more opportunities for the public to come in and say, nope, that's just blocking my light. And, then there was just some more processes to go through.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah.
I have a question on that section. On the western border of Shorewood, south of Capitol, there's that pink area, which I assume is Harbor Chase Assisted Living. And then south of that red area that's apparently mixed use and it says commercial. What area is that we're talking about? Is that where the Oaks Senior Apartments are now located?
Yeah, I can help clarify that. So the village's only land use plan that we have on file is old. We don't have an updated one. So this is before the Oaks was renovated, or I should say redeveloped. So at that time it was a commercial parcel. So you can see Sherburne is still on here as well. We don't have a current map and we weren't going to create one just for this review because we'll have a new one within the plan. So that's not accurate. I agree.
Okay.
Also on this boundary on the west end, north of Capitol, why wouldn't you bring it all the way over to cover that building that houses Remax
I agree. Yep.
to the right of Wilson?
Let me just make a note here.
Yeah, that's the one building that could use a facade grant.
Okay.
And it's 4 stories. I'm trying to think how tall. It looks taller. You know, the sidewalk.
I think it's elevated right by the bike trail. I think it's really only 2.
Okay.
But yeah, that one could be 4.
It might have an exposed basement, so it might look like 3, but I think technically it's probably 2 with a basement.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Okay. So it looks like we're on the right track for that. And we'll do a parcel by parcel assessment of those boundaries. And then finally, we have a higher density residential category. This is reflecting the fact that a lot of the uses south of, oh gosh, what street is that? Is it Beverly? South of Beverly are currently residential. Area is currently zoned B2, but the village could explore, after the plan is adopted, a custom zoning district that meets, is custom for this corridor. So kind of identifying that Beverly is the boundary where we're really pushing mixed use or commercial development. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, when there's currently single family homes within the corridor, sometimes we include them in the area, sometimes we go around them. So if I look at Beverly in the north, what was that, east, we're jetting around a couple homes that are actually on the business district road. But when I look at the east-west Main Street mixed use, east of Oakland, we include the homes that are currently there.
Okay. I would encourage us to include the homes at the comp plan level because it is a long-term plan. So that's a good point. I will take another look at that.
I would also agree.
Teresa's right that in the district master plan, I think there's 2 or 3 single family homes that are listed as potential sites for redevelopment. So they do include those in that plan.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And then I have to keep asking about the area in River Park. It's all called exempt institutional, and that includes the high rise, the large complex that's there that lots of people live in.
Talking here. I don't know if you can see my like on the
west, there,
southwest. We'll take another look at that. That's probably just the fact that the land use map is a bit old.
There's at least 2 multi-family towers there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
that should probably be in the higher density.
8, but that's the affordable housing towers, those 2.
Okay.
So so it's considered exempt institutional.
That's how they classified it in whenever this was from 2007. But we'll refresh all those categories when we do that.
I can't speak to the accuracy of this current map. It's just what we had in file. So we'll make a note to confirm that that's accurate.
Yep, I've got a note. Okay. All right. Okay, so I think we covered this.
And what's the building height for the high density multifamily? We don't have a recommendation for that.
No, we don't. I was kind of looking at your R9 district in your current zoning code for guidance on that, which is I can't remember now, but in the B2, it's 4 to 5 stories. So I'd like to spend a little more time looking into that.
Okay.
But it sounds like we're all in agreement that this area should be residential rather than mixed use and commercial.
Although that, again, I think I mentioned this before, the building that people said they wanted most of new development to look like was one that's targeted there. It's on the northeast corner of Edgewood and Oakland, right next to Humboldt Park. It's where the Sherman-Williams, I'm familiar with that building because my massage therapist is on the second floor in the back. And it had a real nice renovation of the exterior. So, I mean, that's those buildings that people said, yeah, we want development in the village to look like that.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are going to bring in a mixed use development for higher density housing in there, I think if you use good materials, brick or stone or something that looks better, that has that community character that people want to preserve, that would be okay. But
I would agree. I wonder if we want to take that Main Street mixed use blue and take that south from Shorewood Boulevard to Edgewood for the block east and west of Oakland.
Yeah, why do you recommend that's residential and not Main Street mixed use?
A couple of reasons. One is that it's predominantly residential now. If you start walking that corridor, you do see it, the mixed use tends to start diminishing as you walk south. And I think the idea was to try to concentrate your existing mixed use and commercial. So the idea is, rather than diffusing it across the entire village, is to have all your high intensity, vibrant uses kind of in the same place. So I think that was the thinking there.
I know that's something that President Rozek had mentioned in one of our meetings this year, but there are a number of businesses, successful businesses there already. And I know this is taking a 20 years look forward, but I don't think we want to take, I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Go ahead.
Oh, I personally wouldn't want to exclude the possibility of some commercial within this district, but a predominant character is high density residential. And also I believe Oakland Avenue is bigger in this area. And so it doesn't lend itself towards the walkability that the northern, part of Oakland Avenue does. There definitely is a different character there. So just my personal perspective, I don't mind, or I kind of like the classification category, but I think within there is room for maintenance of existing, mixed use structures. Obviously, the building Barbara mentions, obviously that's fully commercial. So just the general character is a little bit different. Oakland Avenue is a little different. The structures are predominantly residential. So from my perspective, I think it's something that we can work with. If we were to bring Main Street down there, I think that would be a bigger change. And to the previous point, we have heard a desire to concentrate, retail uses to, make it more of a district per se. So I'm just repeating that have already been said, I guess.
Yeah, that section's on L2, which makes it more difficult to be a walkable, retail section. But we're not going to redevelop funeral home, my guess is, and the Harley's building, some of those other places.
Right.
Maybe part of the problem is I can't tell the difference between the two reds. One is mixed use and one is commercial on this. They're too similar. I'm having trouble.
And that's after we fixed it.
Oh.
So it looks like in that residential, in this block here, the only mixed use shown on this map, which we all acknowledge is not necessarily up to date, is this stuff right next to this River Park Court development. And then one parcel here. So
Okay,
I think we're all in agreement though that
the consensus is we want to leave that south of Beverly as a high density residential.
Yes.
And by high density, do we mean mixed use? So again, we could have retail on the first floor and apartments or condominiums or whatever on the upper floors.
I think we talked about maintenance of existing mixed use structures.
What does that mean?
Or allowing, the plan wants to see existing mixed use structures continue to be mixed use.
Okay.
And I think once again, that's a zoning fine grain detail. We can provide a broad perspective of that within this description. And I would suggest, even if it is just a residential building, you'd want at least a legitimate public frontage so that when you walk past it, it's not, you know, a vacant facade or whatnot. So even if it's not a necessarily mixed use building, it'd be more active, whether it's a lobby or things like that. I think there's within design character to maintain a walkable street level without it being a mixed use retail specifically. But once again, I think that's a zoning fine grain detail that we can work out when we get to that point.
Yep, that's great. All right. So, let's see, you just want to back me up a little bit here. So thank you all for your comments on that. Those are extraordinarily helpful. I feel like this next topic that I wanted to cover, we perhaps maybe have covered it, but I wanted to just bring this up. This is your land use strategy from the Central District Master Plan update from 2014. And a question that I've been grappling with is how to incorporate the recommendations of that plan into the comprehensive plan. So one thing that is a little bit tricky is that it's kind of like the vision statement, in that the Central District Master Plan got updated between the comp plan updates. And so this is, you know, it's from 2014, time has passed. So how do we want to capture this? I think we just had a really good discussion about what these land use bubbles should look like. So I don't think we need to discuss that again. But one question that I have is about how proactive should the village be when it comes to redevelopment? So if you've looked at the Central District Master Plan recently, you'd see that there's at least 9 different redevelopment sites or redevelopment opportunities identified in that plan. And there are specific recommendations for each one of those. And so that plan also recommends that the village take a fairly proactive approach to redevelopment. So in that case, the village would take the lead on identifying sites, providing recommendations for those sites, perhaps working with developers, perhaps even recruiting developers to make change happen on some of those sites. And where appropriate, the village could use the tools it has, such as TIF or zoning or other programs, to make the project meet the village's goals and objectives. So if the village has a certain vision for a specific project, using the tools it has to make that come to life. So, so that's kind of what this slide is about. You know, I would encourage that.
Was that slide in the packet?
This one was not. I realized this one was in the packet, and then I realized it didn't show our redevelopment sites, so I threw those up on here. My goal tonight is not to talk about these specific sites, but the idea of whether the plan should, 1, identify specific redevelopment sites and recommendations for those sites, and 2, whether the village should describe the village, like village leadership, as being proactive with regards to those redevelopment sites versus reactive to and waiting for development proposals to come to the village and then responding to them.
We talked about this a couple of meetings ago when President Rozak was present. And I think, I mean, I had shared with the group my thoughts about the individual opportunities for redevelopment, some of which were no longer viable because they'd already been, you know, had redevelopment gone in those sites. And so I think he had thought or had said that we would change it so it would be more of a market approach instead of us going out to proactively recruit developers for those sites, but that the market would decide what sites would get redeveloped. And as far as the map goes, I think it's outdated, and specifically that create a central plaza on the high school campus. The high school already went through their priorities before a referendum was voted on last year. And I don't think there was any desire to create a central plaza there. I think we should keep our hands off the high school property.
Yep.
But so I may not be remembering that conversation correctly, but I thought that President Rozak had said something about letting the markets determine what is done with certain sites rather than us proactively working to develop certain properties.
Correct.
think-
That conversation came up in the economic development chapter when we talked about economic development, potential activities. So the current plan kind of blended both of those concepts in this one chapter. And so, there was kind of competing places to put these goals. So we did somewhat, to Barbara's point, we did somewhat discuss that particular aspect, but the current plan has it in there. So I think it makes sense just to reconfirm, the desired actions.
Right. That's kind of how that came out, is because it is in your current plan, and just kind of wanted to, in your central district master plan, and wanted to make sure that we wanted to shift gears from what's in your current adopted plan.
So basically we're going, it'll be the status quo.
So how do I say this? So I think that the question is about whether the village should identify specific sites and try to advance redevelopment on those specific sites. Because the map that we were all just working with here, this would enable change, but it wouldn't, that would be driven, this would enable different levels of change, but it would be, the onus would be on a developer to bring forward a proposal that would be consistent with the change described on this map, rather than the village proactively identifying sites that they want to see redeveloped and taking steps to advance and making the redevelopment happen. And one thing I did want to bring up was that this draft comprehensive plan does have a number of objectives, and specifically those strategic directions that we talked about earlier this evening, such as providing more senior housing, providing different housing options for different types of families and cultures, providing more shopping opportunities. These are objectives that are throughout the comp plan. And in some cases, encouraging redevelopment is the village's primary way of achieving a lot of those community objectives. And so if there are certain things that the village wants to see happen, the market isn't necessarily going to bring those to bear. So affordable housing project or a specific type of senior housing, if the village wants to see some of those happen, the best way to do that may be to take a more proactive approach. So I feel like it's an important issue to talk about. So that's why I brought it up.
And so with the village staff, we've got the Community Development Authority, which is the housing authority. And we have, Bart and his staff. I mean, I just don't, I don't see really what we could do aggressively to bring people in, to bring developers in.
So
Go ahead, Sangeeta.
thought on that is I'm kind of in the middle of reactive and proactive. I don't think I like how the village has done it in the past in terms of proactive, meaning actively seeking a developer, having a specific idea in mind. In that sense, I would rather the village be reactive and allow developers come in and with their ideas. But I also think the village can be proactive in terms of then comes down to, I don't know if it's marketing, but it's more of a, like having that availability of information of here's what's available, here's what we allow, like making it easier for a developer to find that information and to know that the community itself is open to these options, just not to go out and actually speak to specific developers, because that's what's been done in the past, which I'm not a fan of.
Yeah,
So
that's definitely, that's absolutely a place you could draw the line that would be feasible. I think also when you identify in your comprehensive plan 9 sites or however many it is, that is a way of marketing the community to developers, because you're signaling that these are where we want to see investment happen.
Right. So it's like more of a passive signaling versus an active going out and looking for developers and specific types of even specific types of development activities. I guess I wouldn't want us to be like the Bay Shore, seeking out something we think is going to be perfect for the moment and it being a complete failure ultimately in time.
Sure, but that could happen if the developer brought it to you as well. So
right, I'd rather have it be on them.
So I'd be curious to know how does Dan feel about this element of the plan?
You know, I think communities in general need to be proactive and seek out not a specific developer, but present plans to encourage development, encourage developers to step up. And to Sangeeta's point, that doesn't mean seeking out a specific developer unless there's only one interested point. But I really think we want to be proactive. I like designating certain ones for redevelopment or potential redevelopment because that is that signal that a developer needs that says, you know, the village is willing to step up on something like this.
But what does step up mean? Does that mean we're going to throw money towards a developer?
Whoa, Barbara.
No,
Whoa.
I'm trying to understand what you mean by step up, because some of these sites have already been redeveloped. I mean, you know,
Sure.
the people.
It's just development's hard in general. Remove barriers. You know, if someone needs to do a 6-story building, you know, remove all the barriers in place. Don't have, you know, them sit through 12-hour meetings about it. I'm just throwing these things out. I don't think it's necessarily throw money at it. In fact, I think that the signal from the village in general has been they don't want to do that. But again, if you're going to attract development, you can't do a 2-story building on the corner of, you know, that where you go to your physical therapist or massage therapist. A building like that is really expensive. And, you know, if it's all retail development, that's not going to bring in the revenue you need to do a building like that. So we got to find ways to encourage people to come here, maybe by not giving them money, but making the process simple.
Yeah, I would just say, let's relook at those sites, because again, it's very subjective. What's a good use or not good use? One of them is Benji's. And, you know, they're targeting some properties that are well loved in the village, or that the current business operators have put money into to, you know, the corner bakery is the one I think of offhand, and then it's doing well. So I just think maybe we need to relook at those sites. Not that that corner of Wilson and Capitol wouldn't be a good place for a cluster of taller buildings, you know, but I just think we need to relook at those.
Yeah.
So we like the word encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just add from a staff perspective, in terms of this middle ground that we're trying to seek. So when we talk to developers, or when we see them in the community or at other events or things like that, whenever we have conferences again, you know, potentially, one of the questions that we have is, you know, well, are there any either goals you're looking for in terms of, yeah, we're looking for housing, we're looking for affordable housing, we're looking for, you know, more jobs, et cetera. So they'll ask questions like that. And then they also will follow up with, well, are there any active sites in terms of, you know, things that are listed for development, things that we know. So in the current market, because they're advertised, you know, we would send them to the Queensway site, or we would send them to the North Shore Bank site, but we wouldn't necessarily send them to a different site unless it's identified within a plan like this. So the previous, or I should say the current Central District Master Plan had more proactive identification of quote unquote underutilized, you know, areas. If that's not the desire of the village, you know, policymakers at this point to be, you know, shopping those around for availability, that's an easy answer for me to not, you know, take that reach. But if it is something that we know, like, oh, that one property, you know, and I don't mean to pick on properties, but the Wells Fargo drive-through on Capitol, that one comes up quite a bit. It's kind of a vacant bank at this point. It's a drive-through ATM. And it's next to 2 smaller retail, you know, components. So people have asked, like, what's the deal on that? At this point, it's not up for redevelopment or for sale. So I'm not proactively identifying that to people, because that's just not what I've been directed to do so. But if there are sites specifically like that, that is something that we as staff would need the direction on from the policymakers to say, yeah, if someone comes to look for you, they're looking for a site, you know, I think that one is something that we probably should try to encourage. I'm not saying that site specifically because I don't want to pick sites, but that one comes to mind because it has been asked about. So without identifying things proactively, all I would say is what I know is listed. And so that's kind of the middle ground in terms of how I would react to it. But if we want to do a little more than that, and maybe it's not 9 sites, maybe it's 3 or 4 that we're comfortable identifying, but I think it's a worthy conversation. I know we had an economic development as well, And I believe President Rosick had at least one site that she was comfortable identifying. So I know there's a varying opinion on any of those sites. So if you want to review that map that Jackie said, and if there are, ones that we want to keep on that potential list, we could narrow it down to smaller items, but it is helpful for me as staff to have that if it in fact is our desire to encourage opportunities at those areas.
So that map, are those all landlords who have said, I'd be willing to sell?
I don't believe so.
No, that's what I'm saying. So, but we would say we think that you should try to approach these landlords. It's not a redevelopment plan. A redevelopment plan would be a more proactive, we're gonna work towards redevelopment. This is more of in our future vision of Shorewood, we think that these sites should be encouraged to redevelop, and it's on the property owners to sell it. We're not gonna, interject ourselves, but it's something that I, as staff, would need to have in a document, because I can't just willy-nilly start picking sites, without you guys all getting mad at me, because you should be getting mad at me if I did that. So that's just my perspective. I definitely give them the ones that are listed for sale or have signs on them and say, oh yeah, you should look at these. But previously we had identified other ones that we thought it was worth approaching the landlord or the owner to say, are you interested in me looking at this kind of thing?
So we have done it in the past, but not recently. Is that?
Well, I'm not currently doing it, correct, because we were kind of told to put the brakes on that proactivity.
But what would preclude the CDA or, the bid or whomever to put a poll out to the business owners or the landowners of those properties, just to say, would you ever be interested in where are you on this property? I mean, what I would be afraid of, which is probably what a little bit of Bart is afraid of just like you throw a bunch of properties on a list and it turns out, the owner gets upset because they have no intention of selling and they don't want to be approached or whatever. But I don't think that would stop you from, even if you just had sort of an email list of like, hey, these are the owners of these buildings. They've all been approached. They've all participated in this poll. They're all willing to have a conversation. Have at it. It's between you two now.
So to that point, that would be direction to staff to be more proactive. You would be asking us to do those steps. We currently have not been asked to do those steps, so we've just kind of been sitting back and waiting for things to come to us in the reactive mode. And it ebbs and flows, obviously. So, at some point we're getting too much and we're saying, wait, stop, slow down. We don't need this. But then if we sit here and maybe for better or for worse for 5 or 10 years and don't get anyone coming to us, then I think there might be some people going like, why aren't you helping, this, whatever particular site. So if there was a desire for the bid or the CDA or my department to compile that list, to have that survey, to keep those emails on file, that's a proactive step. We're not doing that right now.
I think that would be a great first step.
I agree.
When the Ascension Clinic moved into the old Sendix space, did they ever lease their old building on East Capitol there? Because that's another site that would make, could be redeveloped. It's surrounded by a taller apartment building, I think, to one side, and the North Shore Bank building on the other side. That'd be another spot that's close to the main intersection that would be great for a taller structure, apartments or condos or whatever.
Correct. That is listed for sale. So that is, and it's in that block that it sounds like you're comfortable with a higher density. So
yeah.
Well, Bart, couldn't you I feel like if someone's just redeveloped it, whatever, whether we think it's a great redevelopment or not, to me, it's like, well, just look back 5-10 years and say, what hasn't been redeveloped in the last 10 years? And that's a site that you could go to. I feel like everything in the mixed use, everything in the commercial zones, an option to anyone who's looking for redevelopment. I don't see what, why. It's odd to me that they need your help doing this, figuring this out, I guess. I don't know, maybe this is something people do, but
Municipalities do go out in general though and kind of pursue this stuff. I mean, especially when you do want development to encourage it. And this is a little off topic, but Jackie, since you're the host, could you admit my phone? I gotta give up the computer. So
Thank you. I wanted to ask about that. Okay.
Sorry.
No, thank you.
So I guess to me that it becomes, as a trustee, it becomes a staff question. Can we really afford to have Bart add this to the plate? Keeping the inventory of contacts, and so now let's say there's a string of some properties there that let's be honest, they don't look the greatest. There's the PC computer place at Sharp Brothers, and I can't remember, is there a pet grooming, and then there's the Wells Fargo.
Still going, I'm ready to watch.
Did they know? I thought they said a hard stop at 8.
Still going, but I gotta,
Sorry.
Carl can have the computer, sorry guys.
It's a little bit of an eyesore. So is that the sort of thing that we'd want Bart to contact? Is this the question that's before us? Do we want it on the staff to contact all those property owners there and say, this is a part of the village that doesn't look so great and could be ripe for development if we thought people were interested in selling? Is this the question we're asking?
That's the question I'm asking, correct? Because, and I don't know, Jackie, if you can go back to that slide, 2 slides ago, in that Central District Master Plan, that map was specifically developed that said, the next one's the one previous, that one right there, that had these 9 sites. And yes, some of them have been done, so we could cross them off, but I believe number 9 is the Queensway Cleaner site. I would keep that on the map for sure. You know, it's there. Number 7, though, I believe is Benji's, which, or the Benji's area, which Barbara mentioned. Sounds like she's not wanting village staff to identify that one as a potential area. Number 3 is
The taco next door, you know, we can't take out the taco place. So. Yeah, originally they were going to take out from that entire block, from Starbucks, Benji's, and what was the Verizon store, and suggested putting up 2 buildings with parking in the rear. But, you know, since then Ruckus was redeveloped, now it's Taco Place. And so.
I guess I feel like it's very subjective, you know, like what one of us values over what another one of us would see as a redevelopment opportunity, which is why I would prefer to leave it more general. Like, here's the area, here's what's been developed in the recent years. Everything else is open, you know, I assume.
Yeah, when we look at identifying redevelopment sites, we usually aren't, unless we know it's a business that's leaving or something like that, we're usually not looking at the desirability or the success of the tenant there. But we might notice that, oh, they're not really using their whole site, or this would be a really good residential site for a number of reasons. We kind of applied several different criteria to identify some of those sites that would make good redevelopment sites. Often building might be outdated, things like that. So it's not totally random, although I completely hear what you're saying in that any site could be a redevelopment site at the right price. And so if we were to identify redevelopment sites in the plan, I think we'd start by taking a look at which ones were identified in the Central District Master Plan. And I know a few others have been identified in conversations related to this plan. And it would really, you know, it's a way for the village to communicate where they're open to seeing some change happen. And it's not to say it couldn't happen in other locations as well.
So do you have to go on for this? I'm sorry. I think Eric had something.
No, it was Dan. I was just gonna say, I like the idea of giving Bart and the staff direction that they can be a little more proactive too in approaching people if there seems to be a potential that may be of interest to people. So that way when they're talking to potential developers at the conferences and stuff he's talking to, he can bring it up. You know, I think that's not a bad thing.
Okay.
Once again, this is just a draft, so we can take what we heard tonight, incorporate it, and then you'll see the results of what we think we heard, and you're more than welcome to tell us that we were wrong if we got it wrong. But I think we've discussed this in a manner that I've heard, you know, a range of topics that we'll just need to, you know, synthesize into something with more direction.
Mhm. Great. So we are at 9 o'clock. I wanted to know if you would like me to continue or if you would like me to pause and just maybe email out some additional questions for consideration.
So do we have just the intergovernmental cooperation chapter?
Basically, and it's just a couple of slides.
I would prefer to finish up that.
5 minutes, another hour. We should be wrapped up with that. Couple slides.
No, I'm thinking 10, 15 minutes.
Do your worst.
I prefer we email it out. I mean, we were trying to stop an hour ago and it takes us that long to get through slides, but you know.
Okay.
Therese, does Therese have a preference?
Yeah, I'm a little getting tired.
Is there something complicated that we need to understand? Otherwise, you know what I mean, in terms of you explaining your part, and then we can just email you our opinion
about it.
afterwards.
I feel that I could, how about this? I think there's one issue that bears a little explanation, and I feel that I know what you're going to say. And so I think we could resolve it quickly. And then I think the intergovernmental question could be handled very easily over email.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Let's do it.
Okay. So the last policy question is related to this areas of susceptible to change map, and we're still in the land use chapter. And there were we heard comments through our outreach about how residential areas, these yellow areas, but pretty much all these residential areas adjacent to Capitol and Oakland, experience a somewhat abrupt land use transition between the higher density mixed use on the main corridors and the fairly low density residential immediately next door. And so some communities choose to allow higher density development, somewhat higher density development in these transition areas where generally speaking, where these yellow areas are. And that would allow for a more gradual land use transition between, say, the higher density development along Oakland to maybe a medium density immediately behind it, then to your lower or medium density single family, two family areas back here. I do think that approach, it would create a more gradual land use transition, but I do think it would be pretty disruptive to the existing single family homes in the area. And it would also be somewhat challenging in that it would require quite a bit of land assembly in order to do a medium density project in these adjacent areas here. So you'd have to purchase a number of different single family homes in order to do that. And given the housing prices that Shorewood is experiencing right now, that might be pretty formidable. So the question is whether we want to promote some change in land use between the high density corridors and the single family in that transition area, or if we want to keep the current land use pattern where we do have a somewhat abrupt land use transition.
Can you show the map that shows where the duplexes are? Because there are some street.
Oh, maybe back.
Yeah.
How about this one?
That map. There are some streets where it goes from Capitol and then the next block is like all duplexes and then it transitions to single family homes. You know, if you had a clean slate, you'd probably design it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So how does, when you're all built up, putting in a provision like that, how does that really transpire? I mean,
yeah, I think it would have to be somebody who is pretty committed to doing that project. So they'd have to buy up several different parcels that were all adjacent to each other and then perhaps it'd be a townhouse type project. So that would help kind of ease that land use transition. But yeah, somebody would have to be pretty motivated to do it. And I was kind of expecting this group to be concerned about the impact that would have on the existing single family, two family areas as well.
I do, but I live in the yellow area, so I'm waiting till the end.
Yeah, on my street, it is a mix of, we have a few single family houses. I've got one of them, and then the rest are duplexes. And right before you get to the commercial district of Capitol Drive, there is a condominium building, but I don't know if it has 4 units or 8 units or whatever. So we already have that kind of segue.
Pattern. Mm-hmm.
Right. And looking at this map, it looks like adjacent to Capitol and Oakland that most blocks have a mix of duplexes or single family. So I don't really know if we need the disruption of putting something in between in that, first lot off of the main streets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because that really would be disruptive.
It almost sounds like with exceptions, we're more in favor of keeping the corridor at 2 to 4 stories than we are of making a buffer to allow 5, to make 5 look less bad. So
Yeah.
to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a great question for what it's worth, because this once again goes towards the whole balancing of the needs. So when we do hear, the issues and concerns of I live in a single family house directly adjacent to the Oakland and Capitol area, we obviously have sympathy for that perspective. But if that's how it was developed and if that's how we want to maintain it, there really is not much we could do about it. In terms of that's just the stark map that we currently have. And so if and when a developer would come to us or a property owner and say, I want to buy this single family house and put up a 3 flat, currently that would not be allowed for what it's worth. You're not allowed to switch a single family to a duplex. So if there's a house right behind the commercial area that for some reason is less desirable for a single family property in Shorewood, that's probably not the case because we're a hot market and people want to live here. But if that were the case and they came to us, I would say you can't put a duplex there because our zoning code does not allow anything but a single family in that property. So I think it's a great question, and it might not be, from my perspective, a large district-wide discussion. But when they do come, if and when they do come, I just want you to be aware that we wouldn't allow a 3 flat or a duplex to be placed in there. So if that's the direction, that's clear direction. But then that stark difference of I live right next to the commercial area is hard for us to have sympathy for if that's desire that we have that stark less transition. So I think it's a great question. I'm happy to hear the perspective of everyone, including those that live within that that block area. I think it's a good conversation.
All right, so that's kind of interesting that we don't allow a single family property to be replaced by a duplex or a triplex, but yeah, we let those multifamily properties be converted to single family. I mean, we have a triplex next to us that's being converted or has been converted to a single family.
Correct. The current and previous policy direction was a desire to encourage more single family owner occupied housing, and so that's why the village had the duplex conversion program. It was meant to incentivize that transition. So we no longer allow duplexes to be built or converted in the village. So just for what it's worth, that that transition zone is currently off limits to that kind of missing middle is what they call it, right?
Okay.
So yeah, on your block, Barbara, if that was proposed somewhere else, currently I would have to tell them no.
So do they have to get permission? They buy a property and it's 3 units and they are converting into a single family. Do they have to get a permit from the village to do that?
Yeah, they get permits to do the work. They couldn't do it the other way around is what I'm saying. You couldn't take a single family and split it into 3 or 2.
Yeah.
You can, the zoning code does allow you to take a 2 family down to a 1 family. That's the current zoning allowance.
Okay.
So, but I don't understand, if we want to increase the housing stock, why would we not allow someone to take a single family home and turn it into a duplex or a triplex? Is it because we had problems with absentee landlords in UWM?
I'm sure that was part of it. It was like I said, it was a previous policy direction before I arrived. I don't have the exact answer because that's never documented necessarily right, but
Mhm.
Bart, isn't it also to do with neighbors? I mean, am I wrong? But don't neighbors, like if you buy a single family home, don't neighbors not want their single family home next door converted to multifamily?
I would suppose that's generally true. Parking, noise.
I mean, it just seems to fly in the face of everything we've been talking about.
Yeah, I don't think that's that. I don't know. I don't like that direction.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking for more, home ownership, I mean, I don't know. I guess I don't fully agree with the premise that the only way to lower taxes or make Shorewood more desirable is to increase housing stock. I'm not sold on that, frankly. But I mean, the transition zone seems like the first step to increasing the, central core mix zone. It's sort of the beginning of the sprawl away from Oakland and Capitol. Doesn't make any.
I think also there's a different concern. I mean, the concern before, like when we moved here 17 years ago, I think it would have been a shock to my system if I was living in that home and suddenly something huge came up. I think the direction and where the redevelopment has already taken place at this point, if you were now going to buy a single family home next to the commercial district, you kind of already know what you were getting into. I think the complaints of people in the past are it's a little bit different now. So I think you have much better idea of what you're getting into when you purchase a single family home next to the district now than before.
Right.
So then do we have a consensus on this transition area? Do we want to continue what we've got, which is if you have a single family home, you cannot convert it into a 2-family or a 3-family. Should we leave that policy as is? I'm convinced now that I think that's probably good to keep the policy.
I agree.
I like the idea of a buffer zone between the commercial district and the single families. Whether that's duplexes or multifamilies is a kind of a question. You have a lot of I mean, looking at the map, you have a lot of duplexes already lined up along.
It's mostly east of Oakland that they'd be adding.
Yeah. So just because someone draws a line and makes a section of plots, right, more desirable for development doesn't make development happen.
correct.
And
Right.
it allows
It still might not. The price of those lots would probably be too expensive to actually, like to Jackie's point, it's probably not market feasible. The more market feasible missing middle that I hear or see would be to convert a single family into a duplex. And at this point, we tell people they can't do it because that's been the policy direction. So if that's the desire to maintain that policy direction, we've had a conversation about it. At least I can confirm that still is the policy perspective.
So they can't even like apply for a special permit to change it.
You cannot.
So can I just ask a question of the rest of the commissioners? I guess I'm a little confused as to why folks would want more duplexes. And we already have quite a bit in Shorewood, quite a bit more than any other place around here. So what's the impetus behind trying to add more, knowing that they probably won't be owner occupied?
Well, I guess just not defending it because I know I would think it increases the value, the assessed value in the village, right? And so could it decrease your taxes? I don't know, it would. And the other thing was it would provide more housing. And if we're short housing, it sounds like down the road in 10 years, we're going to need room for 1,000 more households. I don't know. I could go either way on this. I can see both sides of this. I defer to, I don't know.
I'm just going to say personally, I'm not a fan. So that's just a personal opinion. I am trying to contemplate whether it makes sense as like sort of a barrier or buffer, but in general, I'm not a fan of duplexes. That's just personal opinion of mine.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked that we have, I think, the highest number of rental units in the county, or maybe just as close as Milwaukee County as a whole, but pretty high number. And on a block that has a lot of duplexes, you don't get to meet, it's a different vibe. You don't get to meet the neighbors as much because there is a lot of transition, people moving in and out. So I understand that it's a great entry point though for someone who wants to live here. I think it's a little easier to convert a duplex into a single family than the other way around, just the way houses are, constructed in floor plans. So I don't even know how feasible that would be.
So it sounds like there's a consensus to keep the policy as it is.
Yep.
That's where I am. I mean, I don't see the logic behind having the highest number of renters or duplexes or whatever Barbara just said in the county, coupled with the highest density in the state, and thinking it's a good idea to just continue to add more people.
I agree with Eric twice today now.
Yeah, and it's not going to do much for our tax base. So I would rather put up a taller building where the areas we've identified rather than, add a lot of duplexes here and there.
And I would say, for the sake of getting in trouble, it's not been my experience that the villages portion of the taxes is the tax problem in Shorewood. So, that's the other.
I was hoping we would get into intergovernmental, but we've gone so late that I can't get into trouble. So
I mean, I can, because I'm running for anything. So, how does adding more people lower our tax? It just doesn't.
So you have enough Jackie and Bart to go on?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Bart?
Correct, yep.
Anything else for tonight?
We want to talk briefly about the project schedule.
Sure. One slide.
I will show you the project schedule as it currently stands. I think there was some talk about potentially pausing for a moment while Village goes through the budgeting process so that folks get a chance to get caught up. But as it currently stands, we would be finalizing the village-led chapters and the maps in October, probably pushing back this public engagement meeting into late October or possibly November, depending on what the village is able to handle. But as we've currently got the schedule written, we've got it in October. And then this schedule has us completing the draft all in one document in November, with the Plan Commission meeting to review that document and recommend the plan, and bringing us into adoption of the plan in January. So we'll keep in touch with the village leadership here on making sure that whether this schedule is feasible, but this is currently how it stands.
And so I have a is there a meeting on October 22nd, a Thursday?
I don't believe so.
No, we initially thought that was the case. As I mentioned last week, I will be honest, this schedule is too aggressive, too aggressive for my work list. So
okay. I
would probably consider shifting all of these by 1 month.
Okay. So we will not meet in October?
We might meet in October to discuss some other things, but the public engagement meeting I would suggest would not take place until November.
Okay.
But I'm sure that we've got plenty of things that we could probably bring to you in October. So some conditional use permits as well to review. So we'll have a meeting in October either way.
Mm-hmm.
We could probably use that meeting to perhaps clean up some edges that we have, but the public engagement meeting I don't think will happen until November at the earliest. So
okay. Yep.
That's my perspective.
So there will be a Plan Commission meeting is it usually the third Tuesday?
The 4th, isn't it?
4th.
Yep, I don't have it. I can.
27.
Yes, the 27th there will be a meeting.
For regular stuff.
Correct.
But not comprehensive plan.
No, there probably might be some questions that we'll bring to you as well, but nothing.
Not like this.
I don't believe.
Any
And
good?
otherwise, be in touch by email about issues and concerns.
Yes, please send any comments, intergovernmental or otherwise, to myself or to Jackie. I can give them to Jackie if you had just my email address, that's fine too. And then we'll start working on revising all 8 of the chapters that we've discussed, and tying up loose ends and being able to present a more refined draft with cohesive kind of thoughts to you as soon as we can.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jackie, for your help, and Bart.
Good, thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank
Well done. And Bart, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I think we'd just be looking for a motion to adjourn. I have nothing else, but just for the minute's sake, I know Crystal probably needs something.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Bye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, Bart, I'll be sending you an email with my comments
Sounds good.
and on the intergovernmental stuff too.
Perfect. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.